you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion new single, my hater, the big better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million, the devil, that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Naruto Joins Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of HistorianoftheKais on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Most of the campers were energized once Luke had been given his quest. Almost all of the adventurous half-bloods were hoping that Luke would pick them to go along with him on the quest. In fact, the teen had a small throng of would-be companions follow him to the big house so that he could visit the oracle. Zoe was understandably in a foul mood ever since Chiron revealed that the quest was to repeat Hercules' 11th labor. All of the hunters gave her some space to try and cool down, knowing that Zoe always got upset whenever this particular quest was issued. Even Artemis preferred to let her oldest friend have some space when she got into one of these moods. The campers knew that something was wrong with Zoe this morning, so they stepped even lighter around her than normal. Apparently, Naruto was the only person in Camp Half-Blood who did not get the memo to leave Zoe alone. He spotted her angrily pacing behind Cabin 8 from his perch on top of his cabin. The reason why Naruto was up on the roof of Cabin 2 was because he wanted to test his ability to discreetly climb without using chakra. As soon as Naruto noticed how bad Zoe's mood was, he jumped down to the ground and started walking towards Zoe. Just as Naruto approached Cabin 6, Zoe whirled around and verbally assaulted him. "What are you doing here, Uzumaki? Shouldn't you be in that pack of fools that wish to be part of the quest?" Naruto's eyes narrowed and he quickly shot back. "That tree belongs to my mother. Why by Tartarus would I want to steal an apple from it? My mother has done everything in her power to care for me while still obeying the laws. Now I don't know about you, but in my book stealing from my mother after everything she's done for me would make me lower than shit." Zoe was taken aback by the force of Naruto's reply. She was just about to retaliate when Naruto's words sunk into her head. She quickly realized that out of all the people in camp he would be the only other person to have negative feelings over Luke's quest. Zoe took a few deep breaths to regain control of her temper and then spoke. "I suppose you would have a reason to not wish to be on this quest. But my other question remains. Why are you here talking to me, Uzumaki?" Naruto raised an eyebrow and quickly replied, "You're upset about something and I want to try and help you get back to your usual self." Very quickly Zoe replied, "There's nothing you can do to help me." Almost instantly Naruto replied, "That's not true. I could listen to you talk about what is bothering you. Perhaps I can offer you some advice or point out something you might have overlooked." Zoe gave Naruto a vicious glare, trying to force him to run away. To her surprise, Naruto took her glare head on and wasn't affected by it at all. That fact ever so slightly raised her minute respect for him. Eventually, Zoe was forced to look away from Naruto and directed her gaze to the ground. "You couldn't possibly comprehend what my troubles are, boy. These troubles wouldn't happen to have something to do with the recently issued quest, would they?" Zoe's head snapped up when she heard Naruto say that. A small smirk appeared on his face and he continued, "Last night after my training I broke into Chiron's records of quests, and I found out something interesting. The quest to retrieve a golden apple from the Garden of the Hesperides has been issued 450 times, but it has only been successfully completed by Heracles and Marco Polo. Under Marco Polo's entry he makes mention that he was only able to complete his quest by gaining the advice of a nymph named Zoe Nightshade. Furthermore, he mentions that the reason he traveled to China was to capture a pair of killin as the nymph's price for her aid." A small smile appeared on Zoe's face as she thought about the mythical beasts from the Far East that Marco had given her all those centuries ago. "My lady found them to be most enjoyable sport." Naruto smiled and said, "So I take it that it's safe to say that you're the X factor that enabled Heracles and Marco Polo to succeed where others failed." Zoe guardedly replied, "I suppose that such could be said of me, but that is all I will say on the subject." "That's fine, Zoe. Just remember that I will be here if you need someone to talk about this situation." With that said, Naruto walked away from Zoe after giving her one last smile. To Zoe's surprise, she found herself feeling better about that quest being brought up again after talking with Naruto than before. Perhaps it was due to her finding out that Marco Polo had acknowledged her help, unlike that man. 20 days later, Luke dragged himself back into camp with a field bandage covering the left side of his face, and the rest of his body covered in bruises. One of the nearby dryads spotted Luke, picked him up, and started to carry him into camp. As the dryad brought Luke towards the big house, several half-bloods spotted Luke and cried out in shock. Their cries quickly grabbed more campers' attention, quickly resulting in a stampede of half-bloods towards the big house. Only Cabin 8 and Naruto were not caught up in the stamp of worried half-bloods. They were all focused on a game of Go between Artemis and Naruto. Artemis had challenged Naruto to a board game of his choice to do something different, as she told him. In reality, Artemis was trying to get Naruto to see her as a friend instead of as a friendly teacher. It was step 1 in her plan to get him as her husband. She had been a bit surprised when Naruto suggested Go, and she was only vaguely familiar with the game. Tartarus. She wouldn't have even heard of the game if Apollo hadn't gone to Japan in the 1940s and had his craze for Oriental culture. The seemingly simple game was challenging Artemis, and she found the challenge to be exciting. Being in the middle of a contest also made it easier to talk with Naruto because she could focus on the contest instead of why she was talking with him. The commotion in camp pulled the duo's attention away from their game and made them look at the big house. Naruto frowned since there was a worried and concerned note in the commotion instead of the cheering that should be there if the quest was successful. Naruto turned to look at Artemis and said, "Luke failed his quest, didn't he?" Artemis frowned and nodded her head. We all knew that he would fail that quest since he didn't ask for the proper help or do the necessary research on his quest. Artemis's frown got harder. She briefly read Luke's mind. Foolish boy. He was so focused on his stupid pride being wounded over doing a quest that someone else had already done that he caused his companions to die from carelessness. Hermes will have a lot to answer for to the council over making such a gross mismatch of quest and champion. Demeter and Athena will see to that. Naruto looked down at his lap in shame. He knew that Luke had misinterpreted the oracle's prophecy when he picked one of Demeter's children as a companion for the quest. The line success or failure rests with the gardener's aide was referring to Zoe and not a member of Cabin 4. Before Luke left, Naruto had tried to tell Luke that he was making a mistake, but the older camper had brushed him off. Perhaps he should have kidnapped the young man and forced him to read the facts of the quest. Not that Naruto wanted the quest to succeed since Luke was supposed to steal from his mother, but he didn't want anyone to die either. Zoe also winced when Artemis stated that Luke's companions were dead. She might have been annoyed with those two boys because they were too proud for their meager accomplishments. However, that didn't mean she wanted them to die on this quest. She had hoped that they'd just be roughed up a bit and become a little less insufferable. A quick glance at Naruto told Zoe that Naruto was feeling just as guilty, if not more so, about the results of the quest than she was. Reading her lieutenant's mind told Artemis all she needed to know about the situation for Zoe and Naruto. She looked up at each of them and then said, "Neither of you two is to blame for this disaster. It rests with Hermes and his son alone. Hermes should have known better than to give a quest that has misunderstood details popularly known. Luke should have properly researched his quest and kept his ego in check. The fact that he dismissed the advice of allies thinking that they were after a piece of glory removes any pity for his poor choices." Suddenly, the entire camp was filled with the sound of a bellowing bull. Artemis looked over at her hunters and noticed their startled and uneasy looks. They were still surprised with how Hera called all the gods to a council. Ever since power in Olympus shifted to Hera, the traditional crackle of thunder had stopped being used. The half-blood campers were startled by the bellow, but were not nearly as uneasy about it as the longer-lived residents of camp. Not surprising, since every half-blood in camp arrived after Hera's strong-armed Zeus into a figurehead role. Artemis gave Naruto a small smile and said, "I have to go and likely deal with the fallout of this quest, so I will have to concede this game to you. Perhaps we can play it again, Naruto." Naruto nodded his head and replied, "That would be great, Artemis. I look forward to our rematch." Hera scowled as she looked at Hermes with fury in her eyes. She noted as Dionysus finally walked into the council room looking like a deadbeat drunk. It was insulting that it took him 10 minutes to get to the council room while Artemis was seated in just over a minute. Once Dionysus sat down, she stood up to speak. "We are all here to discuss the disaster of a quest that was recently issued. Athena, read your findings." Athena stood up from her throne with her face an almost demonic mix of rage and grief. Charlie had been her wisest and most brilliant child in centuries. The fact that he was more of a scholar than a warrior had been the only reason she hadn't selected him for a certain quest. He had only agreed to join Luke on that accursed quest because he knew Luke needed someone with wisdom and cunning to help him on the quest. Now, instead of preparing to watch him get his masters, she had been preparing to bury him. She was going to make damn sure her son got the justice he deserved. Somehow Athena was able to calm herself down into a cold fury as she pulled out a scroll and began to read from it. It is my finding that Hermes has demonstrated criminal negligence in both selecting a quest for his challenge this cycle, and in choosing a champion to complete the quest. The findings are as follows. In selecting a quest, Hermes broke two of the principal rules associated with the Council's edict regarding the selection of quests. The first rule broken was the rule of association. Hermes has had no connection to the Garden of the Hesperides from the heroic age or by significant requests for aid by half-bloods attempting to complete a quest associated with the garden. The second rule broken was selecting one of the prescribed quests as his quest for the year. Hera shot Hermes a sub-zero glare to reinforce Athena's point. As part of the agreement to have yearly quests, each of the Olympians had been able to claim one quest as off-limits for one reason or another. Hera had put the quest for the golden apples on the prescribed list because she was tired of half-bloods trying to steal an apple from her tree. It was one of the few good things she had gotten out of her marriage to Zeus. Athena continued to read from her findings so she could get her pound of flesh from Hermes. In choosing a champion, Hermes demonstrated negligence on the following points. In terms of physical abilities, the half-blood Luke Castellan barely qualifies for high-risk quests. While he is first in terms of physical condition among his siblings, he is third in rank among the campers staying in cabin 11 and 15th in rank among the campers excluding the hunters. His half-blood heritage gifts are good all around, but not exceptional among his siblings in recent decades. Currently he has 15 living siblings, 2 who are in camp, who are significantly better than him in their stealing abilities, which is paramount for a quest like he was assigned. The only skill in which Castellan has demonstrated significant advantage over his siblings and other half-bloods in general is swordsmanship. A vital skill to be sure, but it is not particularly noteworthy for his assigned quest. In addition to a poor physical match for the position of champion, Castellan repeatedly demonstrated even worse mental preparedness for the quest. Not once did he investigate why Chiron mentioned Marco Polo. Further investigation on my part has revealed that Chiron gave his hint because he never received notification that the edict sealing certain details of the 11th labor has been rescinded. On a side note, investigation on that matter has been started. Castellan also rejected attempts by his fellow campers to inform him about certain details concerning his quest in the belief that said campers were trying to steal some of the quest's prestige. During the quest, Castellan devoted most of his mental energies towards private complaining that his quest had already been accomplished by another hero instead of receiving a new quest. Furthermore, he demonstrated poor judgment by insisting that his party continue the quest after Patricia Rose was grievously wounded outside of Albuquerque, using up most of their medical supplies to get her mobile. Patricia's weakened condition and the lack of medical supplies was the deciding factors in the conflicts that led to Castellan's companion's demise. All of the gods and goddesses then turned their gaze to look at Hermes, who was cringing. Hera then said as a matter of procedure, "Do you have anything to say in light of these charges, Hermes?" Hermes wisely kept his mouth shut as Hera had drastically changed Olympus's investigation and court proceedings. Hera cut more bull out of the old proceedings than even Athena knew had existed. Long and eloquent speeches that used to get so many deities off by boring the council were prohibited. Only the facts could be presented, and facts painted a very bad picture for Hermes. There was a minute of pause as everyone waited for anyone to speak up in defense of Hermes. Finally, Hera broke the silence by speaking. The edict is quite clear on its agreed-upon punishments. Hermes is to forfeit half of his favor reserves for breaking the rule of association. The quests are suspended for 6 years, and Hermes is to be excluded from selecting a quest or champion for the next 12 cycles when the yearly quests resume for selecting a prescribed quest. This council must now move on to determining what action, if any, is to be done to Luke Castellan for his performance on the quest. Aphrodite pouted and said, "Do we really have to do anything? I don't recall any rules saying that half-bloods must, or even that they can be punished for failing to do a quest. Besides, the wounds poor Luke suffered will leave him scared in such a way that it will undoubtedly mar his good looks instead of enhancing them. That's got to be punishment enough." Demeter turned to Athena and gave the goddess a questioning glance. Athena frowned for a second as she remembered that there was no law allowing gods to punish demigods who failed quests. In fact, there was a law which prevented it. She'd have to get creative if she was to gain even part of her vengeance against the boy. No one caused her children to die and got away with it. An almost bloodthirsty smile appeared on Athena's face as she figured out a way to at least partially attack Luke. Aphrodite is correct. There is in fact a law that protects half-bloods from retributive action because of a god being upset that a quest was not completed. However, that law only provides protection for a half-blood who fails a quest. It does not give them blanket protection for any misdeeds they performed on the quest. Castellan directly caused the death of his companions because of negligence, and for that justice demands he be punished. Decide and quickly cut in. Justice or your vengeance for a dead son, Athena. Hindsight is 20/20 as the mortals say. A decision that looks good to a rookie during the heat of battle often isn't the best choice that could be made, but it is the best that they can make at that time. Almost immediately Athena shot back. Castellan was no rookie to fighting monsters. No half-blood child who has survived on their own for several years against monsters can claim that title. This was willful neglect by a seasoned fighter, and the boy should face the consequences of his actions. Enough, Hera called out in a booming voice to get all of the deities' attention. These proceedings are not to be bogged down with philosophical debate. The fact is that 2 demigods under Luke Castellan's command died during his quest. We will now vote whether or not he needs to be punished for this. If he is to be punished, we will then decide what his punishment is to be. Let the voting commence now. The rest of summer passed faster than Naruto expected, and before he knew it he was celebrating the last day of the summer session with the traditional banquet. To Naruto's surprise and great fortune, Hera had arranged for her weekly visit to be during the banquet so that they could have dinner together. One could almost imagine that Naruto had swapped places with Apollo because of how bright his smile was over having dinner with his mother. Around Naruto's neck was his necklace with a single bead. On the bead there was the picture of a girl shooting a bow. Naruto had pushed and got the other campers to agree that having a goddess join camp as the archery teacher was the most momentous event during the summer session. It was at least better than having the bead commemorate the disastrous summer quest. Luke's quest had become a taboo subject in Camp Half-Blood when Artemis and Dionysus had returned from the council session a little over a month ago. They informed the campers that the yearly quests would be suspended until further notice. Chris Rodriguez was quietly promoted to counselor of Cabin 11, and the temporary swordsmanship trainer who had been filling in during the quest was given the position permanently. Most of the Olympian Council felt that removing Luke from positions of authority in camp was the best way to handle his inability to be a leader. Hera smiled at Naruto, proud at how well he had done for his first summer at camp. Part of her wished that he had chosen to become a year-round camper. However, she could respect that he was returning to Alaska so that he could be with his mortal friends. It would also give him greater opportunity to train his shinobi abilities. The night training once a week kept Naruto's skills up and improved them slowly, but it didn't give him the edge that Hera knew he'd need one day. She had sent Tsunade a dream to request permission for Naruto to teach the shinobi arts to the campers. Without Tsunade's permission, Hera knew that Naruto would refuse to teach any half-blood even if she and all of the Olympians ordered him to do so. That loyalty filled the goddess's heart with pride, since a man should keep his word. If she had judged the time shifts correctly, Tsunade should be able to give her a response sometime in January or February, since Hera had set up the dream message to start again when Tsunade next went to bed. Naruto ended Hera's musing by holding a plate near her and saying, "Baklava, Mom." Hera blinked her eyes in surprise before she happily took a few pieces for dessert. Once Hera had her dessert, Naruto placed a few pieces on his plate and returned the plate with the remaining baklava to the dessert table. As soon as Naruto returned to the table, he attacked his dessert with as much gusto as table manners allowed. Baklava had quickly become his favorite dessert since he came to Earth. Chiron soon announced that campfire songs would start in a few minutes after everyone had a chance to wash their hands. Hera smiled at Naruto and said, "Sadly, it's time for me to leave again, Naruto. I love you." Almost immediately, Naruto pulled Hera into a hug and replied, "I love you too, Mom. I can't wait to see you again next week." Hera kissed Naruto on his forehead and then disappeared in a cloud of leaves. Some of the campers sent Naruto jealous glares that he again got to spend time with his mother. Sure, Hera had quickly become one of the more popular goddess in camp since she often joined in the camp games, but they wanted to spend time with their divine parents as well. At least she often would pass along messages from the gods and goddesses to their kids. Those messages made the campers feel a lot better. The campfire sing-along lasted its usual length of time. Naruto still wasn't too thrilled about singing. However, his annoyance at singing didn't dampen his joy at spending time with friends and family. Once the sing-along was over, Naruto got up and headed to his cabin. Along the way, he would occasionally wave to a camper or two, and once he even waved to a hunter as he made his way to cabin 2. The hunters were still guarded around everyone else in camp, but they had warmed up a good deal as long as someone didn't try to get fresh. Naruto had noticed that many hunters kept their eyes on him as if evaluating him for something. Probably for that mysterious task that Artemis was eventually going to want him to do. Once inside his cabin, Naruto quickly sealed away his luggage for the trip back to Alaska in the morning. He then turned off the lights and hopped into bed hoping that Morpheus wouldn't send him dreams that were too bizarre. Now in the 7th grade, Naruto was embarking on his most perilous task yet, a field trip to the state capital of Juneau. For most middle school students, the 2-day field trip was party time. It was a chance for them to have time with their friends away from their folks. However, it was a totally different story for Naruto since he had passed the absolute limits of Olympus's influence an hour ago. He was completely on his own and couldn't even hope that a prayer would be answered, as it was likely that the Olympians wouldn't even be able to hear a prayer from his current location. Every bump on the road had Naruto ready to bring out his lucky bat as he kept his kanabo in hand's reach at all times. What really put Naruto on edge at the moment was the fact that the bus was driving along a coastal mountain road with a lot of trees on the mountain. Everything about this stretch of road screamed prime ambush area to the shinobi. Arnold looked at his friend and said, "Hey Naruto, how was your weekly Skype game with your friend from that summer camp?" Naruto sighed and replied, "I still haven't won a single game of chess. Luckily, we'll be starting to play Go next time, so I have a good chance of winning that game." Artemis isn't nearly as familiar with Go as she is with chess. Artemis and Naruto had gotten into the habit of playing strategy games with each other at Camp Half-Blood and had decided to continue it after the summer session was over. Iris had been very accommodating by letting the duo play a game once a week over Iris message. The goddess of rainbows thought it was great to have front row seats to observe the maiden goddess trying to court a guy. Arnold nodded his head, still having a bit of trouble wrapping his mind about the real world that Naruto had introduced him into. Over the summer while Naruto was away, Arnold had become acquainted with some of the local spirits who lived around town. Many of them had been amused to spend time with a clear-sighted mortal. Arianwan, the dryad of a white oak in the town park, had been especially friendly to Arnold, much to his confusion and later Naruto's amusement. The semi-jovial atmosphere between the two friends ended when they heard the sound of a tree falling. Instantly, the bus driver slammed on the brakes, but he was unable to prevent the bus from hitting the downed tree. Naruto used his chakra to lock himself into his seat while grabbing Arnold and his kanabo. Many of the students were thrown around their seats and several fell onto the floor. As soon as the bus stopped moving, Naruto looked around to check out the state of his fellow students. Almost everyone had bruises, but there were no serious injuries. Just as Naruto finished looking at everyone, one of the girls screamed out, "Oh my god! There are grizzly bears approaching us." Everyone turned to look at the bears approaching the bus. While many students started to scream, both Naruto and Arnold frowned as they saw what was really lumbering towards them. Half a dozen 11 feet tall men wearing suits of fur and mail lumbered down the mountain towards the bus. All of them were armed with wicked-looking battle axes that were dripping with fresh blood. Naruto and Arnold turned to look at each other and Arnold sighed, "Can't we ever have a normal field trip?" Naruto chuckled as he punched out the window he was sitting next to on the bus. "With me on the bus? No way, Arnold." Naruto quickly jumped through the window and hit the pavement running. Some of the giants spotted his movement and turned their heads to look at the shinobi. Naruto firmly held his kanabo in his left hand while forming a rasengan in his right. He then let loose a wave of killing intent to get the giants' attention. All 6 giants turned to look at Naruto and growled. The lead giant called out, "Get the ant's child. Whosoever brings me his skull can spare one of the women for company tonight." 3 of the giants immediately roared out in joy as they rushed towards Naruto at speeds faster than a sprinting deer. One of them immediately tried to split Naruto in half with his axe. The axe missed by a hair and dug a gash into the road before the giant pulled the axe out without breaking his swing. Naruto blocked the swing from the next giant with his rasengan, creating a sonic boom from clash of the weapon and attack. Part of Naruto was shocked that his attack didn't break the axe, but he kept calm and slammed his kanabo into the shaft of the axe. Naruto's weapon smashed through the wood of the axe to the giant's astonishment. He quickly followed up by planting the kanabo on the road and jumping up to deliver a mule kick to the giant's face. The 3rd giant tried to chop Naruto down his waist while he was in midair. Naruto was able to twist out of lethal range of the attack, but the blade of the axe still scraped his back, drawing blood. Naruto landed on the ground and quickly started to run to better ground. As he was running, the giant who had successfully hit him used his finger to pick up some of Naruto's blood from the axe and tasted it. The giant frowned and muttered, "Something isn't right about this ants. His blood tastes of the Vanir, but there's something new and foul partially covering the taste." One of the giants shot back, "Who cares if the ants tastes foul? We haven't seen any ants in years, and even a foul-tasting one would be a delicacy." Besides, the men children in that bus will be enough food for all of us. Naruto quickly summoned a dozen clones, and together all of the Narutos used the Shuriken shadow clone technique on Shuriken with explosive seals in the center. A cloud of metal death quickly hit the three giants and tore the road to shreds. Naruto jumped a few feet to the side just in case and created a dozen more clones to try and save his fellow students from the giants attacking the bus. Naruto's fears were confirmed when two axes flew out the smoke and killed three of his shadow clones. The smoke quickly cleared enough for Naruto to see the three giants. Their arms and faces were covered in bloody cuts and the furs on their outfits were torn to shreds. However, their male suits were in perfect condition. The barely teenage shinobi threw exploding cards at all six giants and started calling them names to get all of them to focus on him. As he did this, he tried to think of a way to deal with the current situation. Using the Kyuubi's chakra seemed like the best solution to take these monsters down. But he had his fellow students to think about. That chakra was way too dangerous to use around civilians, especially when he was trying to protect the civilians. He also had to avoid bringing the forest down or even worse triggering an avalanche. Another headache for Naruto was the fact that the giants weren't about to leave the bus alone. Twice he tried to draw them away only for some of the giants deciding to head back to the bus. Nimbly the shinobi dodged another axe swing and slammed his kanabo into the giant's chest. The giant was literally forced a foot back from Naruto due to the force of the impact. However, the giant merely grunted and continued to attack. Was it the giant's armor that was protecting them, or were they somehow immune to the effects of celestial bronze? Naruto swerved away from a kick and then slammed his down on the exposed knee. The giant howled in rage as his knee broke and twisted in an unnatural manner. However, the wounded giant was able to get some payback by punching Naruto in the back where he had been cut. The punch sent the shinobi flying towards the guardrail, which Naruto broke through at the cost of 2 ribs. As Naruto fell towards the ocean below, he felt true fear for the second time in his life. How was he going to save everyone in this condition? A pair of strong arms caught Naruto just before hitting the ocean waves. Naruto blinked his eyes in shock as a breathtakingly beautiful woman with fiery red hair held him close. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto could see that his savior was riding a golden motorcycle that was flying in the air towards the bus. The woman smiled and said, "Rest, brave ants. You battled well against so many Jotun for one who has so recently entered the northern realm. But now you must rest, for I do not think it is your time to enter Valhalla or Folkvanger." Trying to keep conscious, Naruto whispered, "Please save them." He was barely able to finish his request because of the pain. The goddess smiled and said, "Do not worry, child. I, Sunna, goddess of the sun, will see to your companion's deliverance from the Jotun this day." Sunna drove towards the Jotun, surprised at what the ants, as the residents of Asgard called the living hybrids of men and gods, had accomplished on his own. Most ants knew to leave the Jotuns to the Einherjar or the Valkyries. As the enemies of the gods, the Jotuns could only be slain by a resident of Asgard. For an ant to even wound a single Jotun was worthy of song and spoke of the child's power. It also spoke well of his character that he was fighting to defend his companions. Just seconds after Sunna grabbed Naruto, she parked her motorcycle on the roof of the bus. She then leapt off of the motorcycle and set Naruto down on the roof. With the same unbroken movement, Sunna whirled around and stretched out her hand, forming a small flame. As Sunna then moved her outstretched hand in a large circle, a series of runes made of flame appeared floating in the circle. She quietly chanted, "Runic arts, protection of Yggdrasil's branches rune." Energy in the shape of a tree branch poured out of the circle of runes and quickly wrapped around the bus in a protective embrace. All 6 Jotuns stared at Sunna in utter hatred. The goddess's arrival and that infernal barrier she had created would make getting dinner a hell lot harder for them. That they had been wounded by the whelp of an ants only pissed them off worse. One of the Jotun growled out, "The winter night will be coming early this year." Sunna smirked as she reached and pulled out a cold iron rifle that had served as the inspiration for the AK-47. She quickly brought the butt of her mystically forged weapon to her shoulder and aimed at the Jotun who had threatened her. Manny isn't going to be pulling overtime anytime soon. Sunna pulled down on the trigger and beam of golden energy a foot across erupted from the gun. The beam struck the Jotun's head and vaporized it. Part of the goddess's attack was deflected by the cold iron mail suit that the Jotun was wearing. But it was a pointless defense for the Jotun without the Jotun's head intact. The remaining Jotun quickly shifted to a defensive posture with their axes. Inside the bus, Arnold was the only student still conscious, as the other had fainted in terror when Naruto had started using explosions. Arnold was quite terrified himself since he could see what was really going on. He had somehow been able to stay conscious through sheer force of will. If Naruto could risk life and limb to try and save everyone, the least he could do was watch his friend. Arnold knew that he had no chance of staying alive when he saw Naruto pushed off of the cliff towards the ocean. He immediately reached into his pocket for his wallet and fished out 2 quarters. Just as Arnold was about to swallow the coins, he saw Sunna drive up to the bus's roof carrying Naruto with her. Perhaps he wouldn't have to meet the ferryman just yet. Arnold watched in fascination as the Jotun futilely tried to break through the barrier and also deflect Sunna's attacks. Several times the Jotun used their cold iron axes to deflect Sunna's attacks. However, they slowly were slain one by one under the goddess's relentless assault. Arnold waited a few seconds and then watched as Sunna ended the barrier and jumped down to investigate the Jotun. Part of Arnold wanted to stay where he was since anyone who could take out those monsters could crush him like a bug. However, another part of Arnold wanted to thank her and check up on Naruto. That part of the boy won out and he nervously opened the bus door. Sunna ended her investigation of the Jotun's wounds from Naruto and whipped her head around to see Arnold at the bus door. She stood up and called out, "The danger has passed, mortal child." Sunna took a few steps closer to Arnold, surprised that he was still conscious since most mortals passed out when the gods battled. "Are you a Gothai, mortal child?" Arnold blinked his eyes in surprise before he stuttered out, "Gothai? I don't know what a Gothai is, ma'am. I'm just a clear-sighted mortal who's very grateful that you saved everyone from those giants." In his mind, Arnold was desperately praying that he didn't annoy the lady. Like any deity, Sunna picked up Arnold's prayer and was mildly amused by it. She smiled and said, "You are a Gothai, mortal child. It is how we of the North refer to those mortals who can see past the weave. Return to the bus and rest. The police will be summoned, and when they arrive you will tell them that the bus was attacked by bears after a tree fell on the road." Arnold nodded his head and started to turn around to go into the bus. However, he stopped and nervously turned his head around. What about Naruto? A pensive and conflicted look crossed Sunna's face as she headed closer to the bus. She looked back at the Jotun remains that were starting to melt away. After a second she said, "Naruto will be coming with me for treatment. Worry not for your friend, for he will be returned before the end of 2 days. Know that the weave shall be altered so that regular mortals will believe he was home with a cold." Sunna then jumped onto the bus roof, grabbed Naruto, got on her motorcycle, and drove off over the ocean. High above Moscow, beyond the reach of any mortal means, similar to its western counterpart Olympus, floated the massive fortress city of Asgard. Heimdall was sitting by the gate and watched as the Bifrost was summoned and Sunna rode out on the rainbow bridge to stop in front of the watch god. He stood up and said, "What brings you back to Asgard so quickly from your hunt?" Sunna pointed to Naruto, who was currently lying across her lap. "I found this ant fighting off 6 Jotun whom he managed to wound in Alaska. I slew the Jotun and brought him here for treatment." Sunna's face became deadly serious as she continued. "Heimdall, his name is Naruto Uzumaki." The watch god recoiled back from shock and stared at Naruto's unconscious body in disbelief. "That's impossible, Sunna. The Uzumaki lived in Alfheim. No mortal from that realm has stepped foot in Midgard since the first men were sent there to survive the Abyss War and the Ragnarok of the First Era. Besides, the Uzumaki were destroyed when their village was sacked. Impossible or not, this has happened, Heimdall. Now will you open the gates so that I may take the boy to see Idun for treatment?" While Sunna might have phrased it as a request, there was no doubt in the god's mind that he had received an order. Heimdall really did not want to get into a fight with a goddess and promptly opened Asgard's gates so that Sunna could drive through. Asgard was composed of dozens of halls mixed in with markets and training grounds. The buildings all had stone foundations and were built out of the strongest and most beautiful woods one could find in the north. While practical, the buildings were also decorated with wood carvings showing pictures of nature, accounts of the past, and dozens of battles. Asgard's roads were made of carved granite and weaved around the buildings in a flowing manner. Inside its walls, the city sat on a hill, so the halls with Valhalla at the very top and center of the city. Sunna quickly drove down the twisting roads until she got to Idun's hall, which served as Asgard's hospital. The sun goddess quickly parked her bike, picked up Naruto, and hurried into the hall. As normal, the beds in Idun's hall were filling up with Einherjar, who were rapidly healing through the hall's power. There was a flash of light as another terribly wounded Einherjar was transported from the battlefield to a bed. Sunna smirked as the Einherjar tried to get up, only for Idun to spot him and punch him out. When will most Einherjar learn that just because the hall can heal you in an hour or two does not mean you can start fighting as soon as you wake up in the hall? Idun quickly spotted Sunna and walked over to her fellow goddess. A smirk appeared on Idun's face and she teasingly said, "Have you been taking lessons from Sijin? You do realize that if you're going to play rough, you and your partner should have a safety word set up." An atomic blush appeared on Sunna's face as she stuttered out, "Idun, how can you say such a thing?" The healer goddess continued to smirk as she reached out to grab a hold of Naruto. Well, Suna, what else am I supposed to think when you come barging into my hall holding a very attractive if a bit young ants in your arms? But enough teasing for now. Who is the boy and how did he get hurt? Iden took Naruto from Suna and started walking towards an empty bed with the other goddess following her. In a crisp manner, Suna stated, "The young man's name is Naruto Uzumaki. I discovered him fighting the remains of that Jotun clan in Alaska that the band of Valkyries assigned to that region was searching for. He wounded them while trying to defend a bus full of mortal children and was injured in the process. I rescued him, slew the 6 Jotun, and brought him here for treatment. Do you have any further questions, Iden?" "Yes, but not from you, Suna," Iden quickly said as she placed Naruto in the free bed. Iden then raised a finger causing it to glow with green energy and drew a spiral half a foot in the air above Naruto's head. Once Iden removed her finger, the spiral started to spin around quickly, picking up speed until it looked like a solid circle. Naruto's chakra network started to glow and it quickly became bright enough to be seen by the naked eye. With a snap of her finger, Iden cancelled the rune, which in turn stopped Naruto's chakra network from glowing. She then started to rub her temples in frustration. "Shit, the boy does hail from Ulfheim. How the fuck did he alter the Bifrost to come to Midgard?" Iden then created a duplicate of herself and the duplicate quickly drew some of Naruto's blood. The duplicate quickly hurried off to the hall's record room to try and find out if her suspicions about Naruto's lineage were correct. They most likely were, given how important clan bloodlines were in Ulfheim, but one should never assume. Iden then turned to Suna and said, "Go get Balder and let him know that we have an Uzumaki from Ulfheim here. I'd also suggest telling Modi, Magni, and Thrud since they're eager for news from Ulfheim." She then looked down at Naruto in pensive hope and whispered to herself, "Perhaps the last Ragnarok was not such a disaster as we feared." When Naruto woke up, he saw a troop of unknown people surrounding his unfamiliar bed. Naruto immediately shifted to a defensive posture and said, "Who are you people?" As he said this, the young shinobi demigod was searching for an exit or a possible weapon with which to defend himself. The unknown people started to smirk with pride as they looked at Naruto. This only confused the young man and caused him to blurt out, "Where the Tartarus am I?" The brilliantly handsome man sitting to Naruto right near Suna smiled and said, "You're in the wrong realm to worry about Tartarus, Naruto. For your information, I am Balder, King Pro Tempore of Asgard and leader of the Northern Realm. You are in Iden's hall within Asgard, which serves as the city's hospital. As for who we are," a small twinkle appeared in Balder's eye as he gestured to the surrounding people crowding Naruto's bed. "We are the Aesir. We are the rulers of the north and the gods whom the ancient Germanic people worshipped. But perhaps what is most important to you is that we are your kin." Naruto gave Balder a confused look and made a time-out motion with his hands. "Excuse me, do you really expect me to believe everything you just told me, Mr. Balder? You say that you're gods. Alright, I can buy that since I've already met gods and goddesses before. But do you really expect me to believe that I'm related to you?" Iden quickly spoke up, grabbing Naruto's attention. "You're not related to Balder, Naruto. His bloodline strictly comes from the old Aesir side of the pantheon. Your bloodline shows signs that you are descended from the Vanir portion of the pantheon. I have my suspicions as to who you are descended from, but I cannot prove it without looking at your family register. The Kyuubi and the Olympian influences on your bloodline skewer my tests too much for further certainty." Instantly, Naruto became even more defensive in his posture, forming a rasengan in both hands. "How do you know about the Kyuubi?" Balder calmly looked at Naruto and said, "We know because the Uzumaki clan knew. The Uzumaki clan always knew about the Kyuubi since part of their treaty with Konoha included the fact that they would always provide someone to be the Kyuubi's host. As for the question that just came to mind, we know what the Uzumaki clan knew because most of this pantheon used to be reincarnated into the Uzumaki clan after each Ragnarok occurred in order to regain their strength and be reborn as their divine selves of the next cycle." Naruto's face turned blank in shock before he cancelled his rasengans and fell back into the bed in a near daze. Hearing that a bunch of gods apparently were born into his clan was almost too much on top of all the other information he had been hit with in the last few minutes. Only the fact that Naruto had previous experience with finding out shocking information kept him from fainting in shock. He then said while bracing himself for another shock, "What do you mean by cycle?" Naruto was hoping for enough information that he could make sense of what Balder was telling him. There was a look of surprise on Balder's face before he remembered that Naruto hadn't been exposed to the Norse mystical realm before. He He calmly spoke like an expert storyteller. In the north, all of us who are not grounded in the mortal realm experience a cycle of events over and over again that culminate in most of the gods' demise. Out of this destruction, the gods are soon reborn to continue this cycle of events. We call this destruction and reset of the cycle Ragnarok, which is known to regular mortals in a slightly distorted form. All the gods and goddess who are killed during Ragnarok have their souls sent to the elemental countries, which are known on earth as Alfheim. Once in the elemental countries, those divine souls are reborn as mortals so that their souls can recover and upon their mortal death after a long life ascend back to their status as Aesir. By a long-standing pact with the kami of the elemental countries, all Aesir have been reborn into the Uzumaki clan. The clan's unique chakra and vitality quickly revitalizes slain deities' souls, allowing them to be completely reborn after a single lifetime, whereas it would take a deity soul a dozen mortal lifetimes to regain its strength if it was reincarnated into any other mortal line. Our presence in the Uzumaki clan also helped the clan by reinforcing and strengthening the clan's bloodline. Even regular clan members who were not reincarnated Aesir gained powers that rivaled the greatest avatars of the kami. We also imparted into the bloodline an innate understanding of seals since they are the equivalent of runes. It was rather easy for Naruto to digest this latest revelation from Balder. The Uzumakis had apparently been some sort of mystical therapy clinic for the Norse pantheon every time they managed to get themselves killed. That might explain why his mother's mortal half had been born into the Uzumaki clan instead of being born into any other clan. A sudden thought came to Naruto and he blurted out, "You aren't implying that I'm a reborn Aesir, are you?" A round of chuckles erupted from the gods and goddesses surrounded Naruto. Idun was the first to regain her composure and she said, "No, Naruto. The Kyuubi's presence was too powerful and close during your conception for an Aesir soul to be reincarnated as you. Your parents were probably living in the same house or possibly the same city block as the previous Kyuubi's host." Naruto cut Idun off in a deadpan tone of voice. "My mother Kushina Uzumaki was the Kyuubi's previous host." Balder nodded his head and then turned to face one of the Valkyries who had accompanied him into Idun's hall, and was currently standing by the door. "Go with all haste and fetch Fjolnir and Jerd. Also you are to inform them of Naruto lineage so that they may prepare a place for him in their hall for his stay." Balder turned to another Valkyrie and said, "Go to the cooks of my hall, and inform them that I want the best mead brought out for tonight's dinner, and that it is to be a proper feast of celebration. Hurry everyone, we have much work to do to prepare for tonight and not much time left." Most of the assembled gods and goddesses quickly left to prepare for the sudden feast. Suna and Idun remained in the hall with only Suna staying next to Naruto. Suna saw the look of confusion on Naruto's face and decided to explain things to him. Kushina Uzumaki was the daughter of Natsu and Urza Uzumaki. Suna waited for Naruto to confirm his grandparents' names, which she honestly didn't need. Only one Uzumaki had been living in Konoha when the clan's village had been destroyed and the name Kushina stood out in the clan. Natsu and Urza were the reincarnations of Freyr and Jerd. That makes Jerd your grandmother and Fjolnir your uncle. Naruto quickly accepted this, as having divine relatives really wasn't a shock to him anymore. However, something bugged him and he asked his savior, "What about Freyr? Why didn't Balder ask for him to know about me?" A depressed look appeared on Suna's face as she spoke. "Freyr has been in a coma ever since he was revived after the last Ragnarok. When the Uzumaki clan was nearly driven to extinction before the second Shinobi War, it caused havoc for us in Asgard. Several Aesir had their mortal lives cut down before their souls could completely heal, causing them to ascend back to their Aesir self in a permanent coma. Others, such as Odin and Thor, had their mortal selves killed far too soon, forcing them to be reborn again as mortals from regular lines. It could be centuries before those Aesir rejoin us, which has everyone in Asgard concerned." Once Naruto heard this, he started to become depressed. It had already been hard for him to deal with the Uzumaki massacre when he had found out about his clan's near-complete destruction years ago. Unlike the Uchiha massacre, the Uzumaki massacre had been kept quiet by the various powers that be in Konoha and other shinobi villages for several reasons. Independent clans were often destroyed by attackers in that era, so it wasn't newsworthy in that regard. Konoha tended to keep quiet because the loss of a major ally seriously hurt the village's credibility. The fact that it took a force of 5,000 high-level ninjas from 3 major villages and a dozen minor villages to kill a clan of 127 shinobi at a 70% casualty rate for the attackers was another factor in keeping it quiet. Every village remotely connected to the Uzumakis and the massacre had their power and prestige questioned. The power instability caused by the massacre directly led to the Second Shinobi War. Having the Uzumaki's destruction brought up again reopened a wound in Naruto's heart. He had been able to make his peace with the event since it happened so long ago, and he had his mother. His finding out that there was other members of his clan out there who were still hurting from the massacre just hurt him as well. Suna put her hand gently on Naruto's shoulder to try and cheer him up. Something about Naruto made it seem like crime against nature for him to be depressed. Don't cry over the past. Everyone here in Asgard has made their peace with what happened. Now is a time for celebration. We have found out about a family member that we didn't know about before who is strong and healthy. Now why don't you get up so that you can meet your grandmother and uncle on your feet instead of in that bed? There are a few rules one needs to know before going to the nightly feasts at Valhalla. First, you do not talk about the feasts at Valhalla. Second, only 2 guys or gals are allowed into the ring at a time to fight as part of the entertainment. Third, the fights last until someone forfeits or one of the contestants is knocked out. Finally, you automatically go into the ring on your first time at a feast. Naruto was currently going head-to-head in a boxing match with Baldur's half-blood. Naruto meant ants as he was still getting used to the Norse terminology, Sun Jokum Broden. There were cheers erupting from the surrounding gods, goddesses, Einherjar, and Valkyries as the fight between the 2 ants fought it out. Naruto had an advantage in pure strength over the older demigod. However, Jokum was fully grown, giving him a reach advantage, and the rock star had a great deal of experience in boxing compared to the shinobi. The boxing match had already lasted 10 minutes and the bets were starting to get fervor pitched. Finally, Jokum was able to exploit an opening in Naruto's defense and unleash a fury of headshots. Naruto had to accept the punches as any use of a jutsu would be an automatic forfeit. Jokum's last punch sent Naruto sprawling onto the floor. Naruto's head hit the ring and he was dazed enough that he stayed down just long enough for a ring out to be declared. Fjolnir quickly entered the ring to help Naruto to his feet while payouts were collected. Jokum left to rejoin his mortal friends who had been given special passes into Asgard so that his band could perform for the evening. Once Naruto was on his feet, Fjolnir gave him a good thump on the shoulder before pulling the young man into a bear hug. Fjolnir and Naruto quickly exited the ring so that the Einherjar Gustavus Adolphus and Simohea could start their boxing match. Uncle and nephew quickly headed to a table loaded with roast boar, hearty bread, bowls of thick stew, plates filled with cracked nuts and fruits, and ready mugs of mead. Naruto wiped the remaining blood from his face just before he sat down next to his grandmother Gerd. Fjolnir quickly walked around to the other side of the table and sat down opposite Naruto and grinned. Great showing in the ring, Naruto. You almost had Jokum out. We just need to get you to practice boxing a bit more and you will soon be dominating the ring. Gerd smiled at Naruto and added her opinion. Your uncle is mostly right. It should be relatively for you to win against the newer Einherjar and the few other ants. However, I'm a bit hesitant to make the same claim about your chances with the older Einherjar and most of the Valkyries given their centuries of experience. Gerd then took a strong swallow of her mead before speaking again. So Naruto, how is your mother doing? I still am having a bit of trouble wrapping my mind around the fact that little Kushina is actually an Olympian goddess. Naruto ripped off a leg from the boar and put it on his plate. He then turned to look at Gerd and replied, last time we talked mom was doing alright. I don't know who's going to have it worse, me getting used to all of this or mom finding about this side of the family. Gerd frowned and said, you might want to hold off on informing Kushina about us, Naruto. At least, wait until you can talk to Baldur about it. The 4 pantheons haven't always gotten along ever since the alliance of 4 kings was sundered in the after effects of the Abyss War before the first Ragnarok. The fact that the West does not have a king makes that particular pantheon harder to get along with the others. Naruto quickly turned to look between his grandmother and his uncle. What do you mean that the West doesn't have a king? Zeus rules Olympus even if it is mostly in name ever since mom took most of the actual power ruling Olympus. Gerd shook her head slightly as if she were explaining something to a child. Think for a moment, Naruto. Haven't you ever wondered about Escalep and his other associates known in Native American folklore? He and his companions are part of the first generation of deities in the West. Have you ever heard Escalep mention a great spirit? Naruto nodded his head while wondering how Gerd knew all of this about him. Hira didn't know anything about Escalep as far as he knew, and he had regularly been talking with his mother for several years. What Naruto didn't know is that the Council of Regents had contact with the other pantheons. The Aesir had known for over a year that Escalep had taken on an apprentice demigod who lived in Alaska. However, the Aesir hadn't known much about this apprentice until Gerd and Fjolnir started talking to Naruto. The duo had just found out about this, so the information hadn't made it to Baldur or the other Aesir yet. After taking a sip of her mead, Gerd continued her explanation. The Great Spirit is how the members of the Western Pantheon who know what truly happened in the Abyss War refer to Auranos, who was the only king of the West. After the after effects of the Abyss War, the West was effectively split into two parts. One part is the area that Kronos carved out for himself after Auranos moved to Alfheim to watch over the first race of men he helped to evacuate there for their protection. There were additional reasons for Auranos leaving the throne of the West vacant, but it is too dangerous for you to know at your current abilities. Once you are older and stronger, it will be safe for you to learn those reasons. Zeus proclaimed himself a king when he overthrew Kronos, but that did not make him a king. He is just a warlord who overthrew another warlord. The second and much larger portion of Auranos' domain is ruled by the Council of Regents. As the name suggests, they govern the West until either Auranos or his heir returns to take the throne of the West. When or exactly how this is supposed to happen is unknown to anyone. One of the few details that the regents have shared with us is that a prophet is supposed to come who will herald the start of the age when the Western throne is restored. But other than that, we don't know much, and honestly most Aesir cannot bring themselves to care. Things will sort themselves out eventually as they are meant to be. Even the Fates, who are strongest members of the Council of Regents, are subject to these events which were put into motion eras ago. Fjolnir tossed a rib onto the floor and it was promptly attacked by two nearby wolves. This isn't the time for lectures, mother. How can my nephew hope to enjoy a feast in his honor if he's constantly being bombarded with heavy subjects? There's no reason to talk to him about weighty subjects which are beyond his control. Fjolnir then grabbed a small bag out of his pocket and tossed it to Naruto. Here's some hack silver, Naruto. Why don't you go and place some bets on the upcoming matches? You can keep any extra winnings over the 40 pieces in there. Naruto woke up with a small, but rapidly disappearing headache as he opened his eyes. He was guarded for a few moments until he remembered that he was in a guest room of Freyr's in Jerd's hall. His kanabo and the massive sack with his winnings that contained his weight in hack silver were safely stored next to him. Naruto quickly got up and changed into the slightly ill-fitting clothes that his uncle had given him. They had belonged to an aunt that Fjolnir had fathered a century ago. The aunt in question was now an Einherjar and lived with his wife, who was Valkyrie, even if she was currently on maternity leave. Fjolnir had mentioned last night about bringing his son and the boy's family over to meet their newly discovered cousin today if possible. Once Naruto was dressed, his nose picked up the scent of bacon frying. He quickly opened the bedroom door and followed his nose until he reached the kitchen. Jerd was in the kitchen happily cooking some bacon with some bowls set to the side filled with different ingredients. She turned to look at her grandson and smiled. "About time you got up, sleepyhead. I was just about ready to holler how you wanted your omelet so that we can have breakfast on time." Naruto glanced at the clock and saw that it was already past 8 in the morning. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head nervously. "Sorry, grandmother. Usually I'd be up for a few hours by this time of day. I guess the party took more out of me than I thought." Jerd smiled and replied, "That's to be expected, Naruto, especially when you consider how well you behaved at the feast given your age and the mead you downed. Only the Einherjars and Valkyries can recover from a Valhalla feast as if it was nothing, and that's because they've trained themselves to be able to do so. Now why don't you tell me how many eggs do you want in your omelet and what you want in it? I've got several different kinds of cheese, half a dozen different diced vegetables, and almost a dozen different kinds of seasoned meats." Once she had Naruto's selections, Jerd quickly went to work making him breakfast. It brought a smile to Jerd being able to cook for family once again. Fjolnir tried to come over when he could, but he did have his own life and his own hall. The giantess turned Aesir had been fighting off a sense of loneliness and sadness ever since she was resurrected and found out that Freyr was in a coma. She visited him every day in Idun's hall, where he and the other comatose Aesir were kept in a special wing as Idun tried to figure out a way to awaken them. She definitely never expected to be so lovesick over Freyr when they first got married, especially given the threats against her family that the moron Freyr had sent to request her hand had uttered to get her to agree to the match. As soon as Naruto's omelet was done, Jerd placed it on a plate, added some bacon, and put the plate on the table. She then pulled out a large pitcher of milk and poured a large glass to go with breakfast. "What are you waiting for, Naruto? Dig in and enjoy your breakfast while it's warm. I'll join you in a few minutes once my omelet is done as well." Jerd quickly made up her own omelet and joined Naruto at the table while he still had half an omelet to go. Once the duo had finished breakfast, Naruto asked, "What's the plan for today, Grandma? I know I need to head back to Alaska sometime today, but I have no idea when you wanted me to leave or how I'm supposed to get back." Jerd smiled and said, "Well, the first thing that's planned for today is taking you to see Balder. Last night during the feast he told me that he wants to talk to you early today. It's probably about your status here in Asgard, and you'll likely have to give an oath of silence about the North until Balder clears letting you talk about us. Now I could be wrong, but as long as you are honest and a little respectful with him, everything will be fine. That said, I do hope you'll be able to find the time to visit Asgard often." Naruto blinked his eyes in shock. Wait a minute, you guys let half-bloods, or ants, visit Asgard on their own? They can come without having to be summoned by a god or goddess. There was a frown of confusion on Jerd's face until she remembered one of the differences between the West and the North. She then said, "Asgard is the true home of anyone with a drop of Aesir blood in their veins, or those who have proven themselves worthy of our company. While ants do need time on Midgard to connect to their mortal side, we encourage them to visit. It helps strengthen the ants' ties to Asgard and allows their divine parents to train them. Here in the North, we do not use the camp system that you're familiar with. The parents are expected to train their children as it is their parental duty to do so." As could be expected, Naruto was rather sour to hear that news given Olympus's laws against the gods and goddesses raising their half-blood children. Jerd didn't want to risk her grandson becoming upset at her daughter, even though Hiro was apparently doing everything in her power to bend the rules to be with Naruto. Rules the Council of Regents had quietly encouraged the Olympians to adopt to mitigate some of the worst problems that the West's curse caused at Pantheon. Finally gathering her thoughts, Jerd started to explain. "Naruto, you shouldn't feel upset over what the Olympians do to keep separate from their mortal children. When the alliance of 4 kings was broken after the Abyss War, each pantheon had to draw lots for a curse. Why we had to do so isn't important at the moment, and it is too dangerous for you to try and look up given your current strength, so please just accept what I am about to tell you and keep it to yourself." The 4 curses were pestilence, war, famine, and death. Each curse affects both the pantheon and has side effects in the regions of Midgard under the pantheon's jurisdiction. As you might have guessed, the North received the curse of death, which is why we have Ragnarok, in which almost all Aesir die each cycle. It also drastically increases the severity of our winters due to that season's ties with death. The South drew the curse of war, which is why the lands under that pantheon are plagued by wars and skirmishes more than any other region. The East drew famine, which is why you can find comparatively so many poor in their regions. The West drew the curse of pestilence. Now, the only reason why the West hasn't collapsed at times from plagues is that both the Council of Regents and the deities of Olympus, who are remotely connected to healing, all work their asses off keeping disease in check. Their mortal children and their descendants have also worked tirelessly to help heal mortals. That's partially why there are so many medical research centers in the West. Even still, they cannot spot every plague like the Black Death and the Spanish flu epidemic show, for example. When it comes to deities, the Council of Regents has been less forthcoming about how their curse affects them. All I or any other Aesir knows is that they call the part of the curse which affects deities the corruption, and it only builds up in each passing generation of deities. The other major detail they've disclosed to us is that the corruption is aggravated when the Western deities spend time around ants, and it gets drastically worse when the ants is of their own blood. In return, it brings out the worst traits in the ants. Naruto frowned as he thought back to his time at Camp Half-Blood. Dionysus always seemed grumpy and Artemis had seemed on edge about something. But there was nothing suggesting that they were sick. Heck, his mother seemed perfectly normal to him and she had been visiting him for years. He frowned and said, "That doesn't quite match up with my interactions with the Olympian gods." Jerd nodded and thought back to what Naruto had said about his time at Camp Half-Blood during the feast. She then explained, "Naruto, the corruption takes time to get worse. I'm talking years and years of constant exposure. Furthermore, you've only interacted with Artemis, Dionysus, and your mother in that dual-natured form, correct?" Naruto quickly nodded his head and then Jerd continued. "In all honesty, you haven't interacted with a typical Olympian who's had their corruption aggravated. And you won't if your experience stays limited to just those 3. Dionysus was originally an ant, which gives him an innate resistance to the corruption getting aggravated and broadcasting those effects onto ants. Hiro will have an even more extreme version of that resistance since she's figured out a way to keep her human nature. A feat I might add that no Aesir has ever done or even thought to try. As for Artemis, I've been told that she's built up an impressive resistance to the corruption and natural ability to mitigate its effects in her over the millennia because of being near her hunters. But make no mistake, Naruto, the corruption is a very serious matter. It once got so bad that the Council of Regents had to request Asgard's help in dealing with it. That started the migration period as ants tribal kings lead their tribes into the Roman Empire so that they could cull the worst corrupted Olympian ants and bring the West back into balance. I know that all of this doesn't quite make sense to you, but I only know part of the story. Only a regent like your teacher Eskalep can fully explain everything to you, and I'm sure that he won't talk until he's sure you're ready to handle that information. Balder was sitting on Asgard's throne with his father's ravens resting on their perches and whispering what they had learned into his ears. The seemingly young god frowned at having to yet again spend another day ruling his father's kingdom. If he could pray, he would have been begging whatever power could be above a god to speed up Odin's return. It was Odin's place to be king and not his. Hell, if Balder could find someone better suited to be regent in his place until Odin's return, he'd happily give up the throne right now. After running Asgard for a few years, he still wondered how his father was able to manage ruling the north for thousands of years. Balder could easily see why the eastern king shattered himself into 3 new deities to take shifts as ruler, and why the southern king had slipped into dementia. Perhaps his father was able to deal with being a king because of his mortal lives as VERYYYY WONDERFUL. These musings ended when Jiraiya and Naruto walked into the throne room of the hall. Balder straightened up in the chair as the two approached him. Jiraiya quickly knelt down at the foot of the throne, but Naruto hesitated and only knelt down after he saw that his grandmother had. Balder smirked and said, "Giving homage does not come easy to Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto looked up with slightly defiant eyes and said, "No sir." Balder got off of the throne and motioned for Naruto and Jiraiya to rise. "That's good, Naruto. No man should be given more respect than he has earned. The fact that you only gave me respect because you saw that Jiraiya, who you hold as esteem, is respectful of me, is good. It tells me that you'll think for yourself and won't blindly follow someone just because they have a title. Now, tell me of your time in Alfheim and how you came to be in Midgard. I must know in order to prepare for any possible problems your journey might cause to the realms." Over the next hour, Naruto slowly gave Balder an edited version of his life in the elemental countries, or Alfheim as the Aesir called it. Parts concerning Konoha's security were left purposely vague, and Balder did not press Naruto on those points. He respected Naruto's willingness to follow his duty to protect his village even in another world. Once Naruto had finished talking, Balder told him to return to Jiraiya while he thought over what he had learned. Balder sat back in the throne, closed his eyes, and carefully weighed everything that Naruto had revealed. After several anxious moments of silence, Balder made up his mind and opened his eyes. He got off of the throne, walked towards the duo, and gently put a hand on Naruto's shoulders. "You have brought great honor and prestige to your bloodline, Naruto Uzumaki. We have had very few warrior princes among the ants in recent centuries, and your actions place you at the head of that group in glory indeed. Were it not for your commendable loyalty to Konoha, I would name you as a housecarl of Asgard, which is the highest honor I can bestow on an ants. As this would place you in a conflict of loyalty, I will not do so. However, your deeds command a suitable reward for passing challenges of such stature. Furthermore, it is expected that as King of Asgard I provide all ants a gift in recognition of their passage into manhood and to help them succeed in life. You are recognized as an adult in your homeland and would be recognized as one on Midgard as well if your mother had not manipulated the Bifrost as she had to bring you from Alfheim. But the question of a suitable gift for you is a difficult one." Balder wasn't sure what he should give Naruto. Usually, he or more often his father would have given an ants a well-forged cold iron weapon or armor to complement their training. However, Naruto already had several celestial bronze weapons and armors from his mother, which were also altered with seals. Celestial bronze was typically weaker than cold iron, but the seals more than made up for the comparative weakness between the two metals. The only weapons or armors in the armory that were superior to what Naruto had were the rune-inscribed master-forged pieces by the dwarves, which were reserved for the Aesir because of their exorbitant cost. Besides the uproar giving an ant such a weapon would cause, it would be poor form for Balder to give Naruto a gift comparable to what he already had, as this gift was supposed to help him and showcase the young man's great deeds. Inspiration suddenly came to Balder and he smiled. "Naruto, as King Pro Tempore of Asgard, I bequeath to you the young foal of Sleipnir which was born a few months ago. This young colt is just about ready to be ridden for the first time and named." Balder turned to a Valkyrie and said, "Bring the colt in question here." A few minutes later, the Valkyrie led a young black-coated 8-legged horse into the throne room. Balder took the harness from the Valkyrie and then handed it to Naruto. Balder smiled and said, like his father and brothers before him, "This colt will be able to carry you across land, sea, and air from anywhere in the lands of the living to the land of the dead once he has finished growing. He won't be as fast as his father Sleipnir, but he will still be able to carry you at supersonic speeds. With this steed, it will be easy for you to visit Asgard from your home on Midgard. Now, what shall you have him named?" Naruto. Naruto looked at the horse again, admiring the power and beauty of the steed. His eyes were soon drawn to a patch of white on the horse's forehead, which was the only different color on the colt's coat. The patch reminded Naruto of the side profile of a cow's head, causing him to blurt out, Bucephalus. The horse turned to look Naruto in the eye with a questioning gaze. Naruto smiled and said, "Yeah, that's your name, Bucephalus. I got it from that patch on your coat that looks like an ox's head." The horse seemed to think about the name for a moment before Bucephalus nodded in acceptance. While Naruto and the newly named Bucephalus were bonding, Balder was nodding his head in approval. Bucephalus was a good name for the colt even if it came from a different realm. The Aesir wondered if Naruto remembered that Bucephalus was also the name a conqueror's horse. Most likely the young ants didn't realize the connection, but it was a good one in Balder's mind. Once the two had a chance to bond, Balder spoke to Naruto again. "Naruto Uzumaki, I wish for you to use a bit of discretion about who you share knowledge of us and just how much information you share. Your mother deserves to know about her kin in Asgard, but I ask that you keep it between yourselves for now. When it comes to the other Olympians, feel free to talk with the regents about us, as Asgard has a good relationship with them. Now, why don't you follow Lind here to the riding range so that you can learn how to ride Bucephalus?" Naruto nodded his head and quickly followed the Valkyrie out of the throne room, with Naruto leading Bucephalus. Once they had left the room, Jiraiya turned to Balder and bowed her head. "Thank you for giving Naruto permission to reveal Asgard's existence to his mother." Balder sighed and said, "Hera is an Aesir now as much as she is an Olympian. While I am not sure what this might mean for Asgard in the future, the facts cannot be denied or hidden. They can only be accepted." Life returned to normal for Naruto once he returned to his home in Alaska from Asgard. Well, as normal as life could be for a half-blood with ties to two different pantheons. Bucephalus was quickly moved into the renovated backyard shed, and everyone affected by the mist thought nothing of Naruto owning a horse. Naruto quickly fell back into his usual life pattern of going to school, hanging out with Arnold, and training with SKLF most days. On Wednesday, Naruto had his weekly Game with Artemis and Iris message where they talked about how their week had gone. On Saturday, Naruto was visited by Hera so that they could spend their usual time playing games or simply hanging out. The only major change in Naruto's life was on Sunday when Sunna visited him for about an hour or so in order to teach him about the North. The first time Sunna visited Naruto had been a major shock to the seemingly young ninja. He had been out training with SKLF trying to get the wily and perverted old animal spirit to start explaining about the corruption and the other facts that the Aesir had hinted the spirit knew. Naruto was just about ready to do a modified version of his harem jutsu on SKLF when Sunna drove onto the field riding her golden motorcycle. Apparently, Sunna had requested Jiraiya that she could handle Naruto's training on northern matters. She apparently felt responsible for his well-being as she was the first Aesir to discover his existence. Naruto quickly agreed since he was never one to turn down help in training, while SKLF started giggling perversely and muttered about how he never thought of that interpretation before. Naruto wasn't the only one who had been learning about the North. Hera had quickly been informed about the Aesir and her own connections to the northern pantheon. Despite her protests, the goddess had fainted when she heard the news, and Naruto had the photos as proof. Hera was still trying to cope with the new knowledge Naruto had given her even after a couple of months of knowing about Asgard. On the one hand, Hera was ecstatic about having parents who actually gave a damn about her. Kushina's childhood memories of Natsu and Urza were among her most precious memories. On the other hand, she was worried what the knowledge of another pantheon would do to Olympus if it became public knowledge. None of that mattered to Naruto at the moment because he was riding Bucephalus on the ocean, barely out of sight of the shore. The eight-legged steed galloped over the water as if he were using the water-walking jutsu from the elemental countries. Naruto had a slightly crazy grin on his face as he felt the icy winter ocean breeze hit his face at over 70 miles an hour. Bucephalus thundered over the waves unbothered by the wind or the rolling waves. The mystical horse kept running and running. A faint rise appeared on the horizon near shore, and Naruto pulled out his binoculars. The young shinobi quickly confirmed the lighthouse's presence that he had been using as a marker for this route within range. Naruto waited until Bucephalus reached the point where the steed was perpendicular with the lighthouse and the road behind it. He checked his watch and then slowed Bucephalus to a rest. Once the eight-legged horse was standing on the waves, Naruto pulled out a notebook and recorded the time. He then patted his steed and said, "Good job, Bucephalus. You cut this part of the run down by 5 minutes. If you keep this up, I'll be able to ride you to Camp Half-Blood for the next summer session." Bucephalus whinnied in approval of his master's compliment. No one and nothing else but him was going to transport Naruto anywhere if Bucephalus had anything to say about it. The son of Sleipnir had quickly proven to be a spirited and prideful mount, refusing to let anyone else besides Naruto ride him. This hadn't been too much of a problem because there wasn't exactly a long list of people who knew how to ride a horse who were also small enough for the young colt to carry. A presence flared in Naruto's senses just as he was about to lead Bucephalus around so that they could go back the way they came. Naruto instantly grabbed some shuriken from his leg holster and prepared to charge them with his wind chakra. He anxiously watched as a green-skinned teenager emerged from the waves holding a trident in his hands with a twisted conch shell hanging around his neck. Something that Naruto immediately noticed was the fact that the green-skinned teenager had 2 fish tails instead of legs and a divine aura emanated from him. After quickly going over his family tree, Naruto said, "Cousin Triton, I presume." Triton frowned at being addressed in such an informal manner by a half-blood. While Naruto was correct that they were cousins, it was extremely poor form for a half-blood to address a god or goddess on those ties. The sea messenger god's eyes widened in shock when he spotted Bucephalus and noticed the colt's 8 legs. Triton could feel a headache starting to brew and he knew that today was going to be one of those days. His father had sent him here to this backwater part of the ocean to try and figure out what had been going on for the past couple of weeks. Poseidon had sensed a powerful half-blood repeatedly entering his domain. Normally, the king of the seas would have given the intrusion a shrug and ignored it. He wasn't a paranoid fool who thought everyone in existence was after his crown. Besides, the intrusion was so far from his power bases that whoever was entering the ocean obviously wasn't trying to challenge him. Laid-back approach to the half-blood or not, the length and consistency of the visits demanded an investigation. Poseidon had sent Triton because he knew his son could assess the situation without blowing everything out of proportion. Triton quickly schooled his face into a serious expression and said, "Naruto Uzumaki, what are you doing out here on the ocean?" Naruto smiled and patted Bucephalus's side. "I'm training Bucephalus here for endurance running. It's harder for him to run on the water than it is for him to run on land. Over the past 2 months, Bucephalus has managed to knock 2 hours off of his time on this run." Triton immediately looked at Bucephalus and quickly analyzed him like any expert horse trainer and breeder would. Extra legs aside, the colt was in magnificent condition and showed all the signs that he would become an extremely powerful specimen. Triton couldn't fathom where Naruto had gotten the horse since Bucephalus wasn't like any mythical horse the sea god had ever seen, and here Triton thought he knew every possible breed. He was so caught up in admiring the steed that he almost forgot why he had come. Once he had regained his focus, Triton inquired, "Am I correct in assuming that the repeated intrusions up here that we have been detecting in Atlantis are because of you training Bucephalus?" Triton had to hold back a small smirk when he saw Naruto blush slightly at the accusation. The sea god continued on, "Why did you not offer my father at least a token sacrifice to start your training? Horses and the oceans are his domains. I find it rather presumptuous that you are training such a fine specimen in such a manner." Just like Triton was hoping, Naruto's blush got bigger and increased in intensity. Naruto started to nervously scratch the back of his head as he explained himself. "Sorry, I honestly didn't think of that. I found Bucephalus living beyond the reach of Olympus, so I thought you and your father wouldn't have much influence over him. Given how close I am to the end of Olympus's reach, I also figured that my practicing out here wouldn't cause a problem for you and your father. I apologize if this offends you, cousin, but it's the truth." Triton nodded his head in acceptance. Naruto's reasons were sound enough. The only reason why he was even here was because of how regularly Naruto trained his horse. Triton quickly said, "Very well, Naruto. I accept your reasons for why you've done your training in this manner. My father Poseidon will be informed of your activities and this matter will be closed. However, to prevent the need for further investigation, I insist that you announce your intentions to train Bucephalus on the ocean each time your training enters my father's domain." Naruto nodded his head and said, "No problem, Triton." The half-blood shinobi paused for a second and then said, "Hey Triton, do you want to go get a burger? It will be my treat for making you come out here to investigate me. There's this small mom and pop burger joint just a few minutes from the shore which has absolutely wonderful burgers and great milkshakes as well." Triton blinked his eyes in surprise. Half-bloods didn't invite gods or goddesses to hang out with them or offer to buy them food. It just wasn't something that was done. Usually, gods or goddesses only hung out with mortals or half-bloods if they were trying to woo the person as a conquest. Triton was a bit out of his depth with the concept of simply spending time with a half-blood as friends or family, as Naruto was implying. Not knowing what he should do, the sea messenger god said, "Sure." Artemis had a small smirk as she looked down at her board and moved her promoted lance so that it checked Naruto's king. She quickly looked up at the Iris message and told Naruto her piece's movement location. Her smirk grew as Naruto's face started to scrunch up as he tried to think of a way out of her trap. After a minute, Naruto simply sighed and said, "Looks like that's game, Artemis." It was a good match. A small smile appeared on Artemis's face and she replied, "Same here, Naruto. I would like to stay and chat, but I have some duties to attend to at the moment. I look forward to our match next week." Naruto nodded his head and replied, "Same here, Artemis. I'm also looking forward to our next match and I hope that your duties won't be too stressful for you. Goodbye for now." With that said, Naruto ended the Iris message. Just as Artemis was about to turn off her fountain, Iris switched the view over so that the rainbow goddess was looking at Artemis. Iris had a knowing smirk on her face as she parroted back Artemis's words to the goddess. "I look forward to our match next week. Can you get any more obvious, Artemis? Seriously, the only way you could be more obvious that you're interested in Naruto would be to hang a sign behind you saying 'my place at 10' while wearing something from Victoria's Secret. That is completely uncalled for, Iris." Artemis snapped at the goddess with her cheeks flushed from embarrassment and rage. The maiden goddess focused on her outrage at Iris's comment in order to keep herself from having a mental breakdown at the thought of her and Naruto doing something like Iris implied. Tartarus. She was working up the nerve to kiss Naruto by the end of the next summer session at camp, and the winter solstice meeting was going to be held in a few hours. Not making out or even a kiss on the mouth, mind you. She was working up the nerve to just kiss him on the cheek months from now. Iris chuckled and brushed off Artemis's rage. The closet hippie goddess found watching Naruto and Artemis's bizarre courtship to be more entertaining than her soaps. "I don't think so, Artemis. Your boy toy seems to be unusually dense when it comes to relationships. I mean, he should have picked out that there is something odd about a goddess wanting to spend time with a lowly demigod, as some of the more pompous goddesses would put it. The fact that the goddess in question has a long-standing reputation as a fiercely independent ballbuster and man-hater should have clued Naruto into the fact that you want something from him." Unable to stop herself, Artemis brought her hands to the sides of her head and started to massage her temples. How was it that her nature as the goddess of maidens and her protection of maidenly honor got popularly transformed into this feminist bitch-like one-dimensional character? She only ever retaliated against men who had acted as slime. Maybe having Actaeon's dogs tear his transformed self to death was a touch excessive. But in her defense, she had trusted him and he betrayed that trust by spying on her while she bathed and then tried to rape her. Apparently, the thought that a girl wouldn't just lay there and take it from a guy frightened most men more than they wanted to admit. Artemis looked at Iris and said, "Naruto makes a point to not judge someone simply on what he has been told about the person. He actually forms his own opinion based on what he sees in a person, and so far Naruto has proven to be an unusually good judge of character." Iris nodded her head as she had observed that quality in Naruto as well when she watched the couple's weekly games. Fleecy was actually a little annoyed because these were the only calls that Iris had reserved for herself. A serious look appeared on Iris's face as she spoke. "All kidding aside, Artemis, I'm starting to get worried for you, as are a decent number of nymphs and other goddesses. Naruto might have only turned 13 a few months ago, but the clock is ticking for you. Now, I'm not into hebephilia or suggesting that you get into it as well. Aphrodite is the only goddess I know who would think about having relations with someone as young as Naruto currently is. And that's only because she'll try to sleep with anything that moves." The tone of Iris's voice became heavy with worry. 18, Artemis. You only have until Naruto is 18 years old to marry him. You've got less than 5 years left and only 2 years if you wait until he's 16 to try dating him like most goddesses do. It would be one thing if you just had to have a one-night stand with him. But for marriage, that's not much time at all. The fact that this is your first attempt at a romantic relationship only makes it more difficult. Artemis quickly cut in with an annoyed tone. "And your point is, Iris." She was well aware of the time limit she was operating under in order to save her hunters. Artemis couldn't go a day without thinking about it, thank you very much, and she did not need another goddess throwing those facts in her face. A nervous and uncertain look appeared on Iris's face as she continued. "I wouldn't even suggest this if it wasn't for how drastic your situation is, Artemis, but have you thought of tricking Naruto into marrying you? I mean, you could arrange for Naruto to stumble on you bathing and give him the option of either marriage or death. Something similar worked for that mortal Gyges of Lydia to get him on the throne." The thought of doing something in that manner to snag Naruto as her husband actually had crossed Artemis's mind before. However, she had totally rejected the idea because of several reasons. Chief among them was she wasn't about to be like her father and win her spouse through trickery. Far too many maidens had been trapped in an unwanted marriage through trickery for her to seriously think about using such a stratagem. Besides, Artemis was pretty sure that she wouldn't be able to work up the nerve to expose her body so such a strategy could work. Artemis looked at Iris and said, I will get Naruto as my husband without resorting to tactics such as that. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to get ready for the winter solstice meeting. Artemis turned off her fountain and started to prepare for the meeting. She pushed her conversation with Iris out of her mind for the moment. She was the goddess of the hunt and there was nothing that could escape her when she wanted to ensnare her prey, even if the prey in question was the heart of a young man. Tsunade was unsettled to once again find herself in the void where she had encountered Kushina almost a month ago. That brat was just as big of a pain in her ass as her son is, and she was before Tsunade thought she had died. The fifth Hokage glared out into the void and yelled, Show yourself, Kushina. This has your name all over it. Hira appeared in her dual state form in front of Tsunade with smirk on her face. You know you're lucky I'm meeting you with my human nature merged into me, or you would be in a world of pain. Tsunade Senjo. Fear of the gods is considered a virtue in my realm for a very good reason. Very quickly Tsunade shot back. It's kind of hard to fear someone who you had to check for monsters underneath their bed. Hira nodded her head, recognizing Tsunade's win in their little verbal sparring match. The dual-natured goddess then got to heart of why she was here. First off, you'll be happy to know that Naruto arrived in my realm safe and sound several years ago by how we reckon time. He lost some skill due to the jutsu to aging him a bit, but those losses have been recovered and he's made excellent progress in advancing in all areas of the ninja arts. The activation of his demigod heritage has given him a massive increase in pure physical strength. It already rivals your own chakra-enhanced strength and is set to grow far stronger. Just as Hira had hoped, Tsunade started to feel a migraine coming as she imagined all of the paperwork she'd have to handle when Naruto returned. The brat had already been hard on the training grounds for a shinobi of his abilities. With the kind of strength Kushina was telling her he had, the resulting paperwork would grow exponentially. Hira smirked as Tsunade started to massage her temples. No one ever got one over Hira for long. Hira then pressed on as she said, I wish for you to give Naruto permission to train other demigods and certain members of our support system for demigods in chakra usage and the basic shinobi arts. Naruto has been admirably secretive with his abilities around other demigods along with his background in Konoha. I'm proud to say that he would refuse a direct order from me to pass along his training to the others without your permission. Tsunade blinked her eyes in confusion at Hira's proclamation. You're proud that Naruto would disobey you. She was happy to hear that Naruto's loyalties to the village were that strong, but she didn't expect his mother to be thrilled as well. Hira conjured a small stool and proceeded to sit down in a regal manner. You forget, Tsunade, that my mortal self of Kushina Uzumaki was a shinobi of Konoha. Her sense of loyalty and duty is mine. Furthermore, in my realm I am Hira, the goddess of marriage. Loyalty and commitment are part of the foundation to a successful marriage. Naruto committed himself to obeying the laws of Konoha and the Hokage's orders when he became a ninja. I'm proud that he has kept his commitment even though he is far from Konoha. Besides, how could I hope to trust him at all if he could break his oath to Konoha on my orders? Kushina, or rather Hira, had raised an excellent point to Tsunade. How could anyone trust Naruto if he couldn't keep his word when things got difficult? Things really didn't get more difficult than when you're separated on a different planet from your comrades for years. The fact that Naruto was staying strong was something Tsunade would have loved to brag about if every detail of Naruto's current location wasn't classified. With that knowledge in hand, Tsunade thought about what she should do. On the one hand, it wasn't exactly a wise move to let village techniques enter the general population. On the other hand, it wasn't like Konoha's rivals could learn the techniques given that it was apparently almost impossible to travel between planets. Then there was the fact that Naruto and Hira were related to the demigods, which meant that they were a clan of potential allies. There was also the fact that passing on his skills would help Naruto become a better ninja. Tsunade firmly said, if I gave Naruto permission, what assurances do I have that Konoha's abilities will not leave the demigods? Some people might have expected Hira to be outraged at Tsunade's question. However, they couldn't be farther from the truth. Hira respected Tsunade's thoroughness because that was her duty as Hokage. With a slightly knowing smirk, Hira said, how is this for a guarantee, Tsunade? In my realm, only mortals with a divine lineage and woodland spirits can access chakra. It's simply biologically impossible for regular or clear-sighted mortals to use chakra. That bit of information nearly caused Tsunade to faint from shock. People could actually live without chakra. The idea flew in the face of every biology lesson she had ever had or taught. Even fleas had chakra, minuscule as it was for the insects. Slowly, Tsuin regained control of her emotions and said, I suppose that is a very good insurance on keeping everything contained to your group. Tell Naruto that he has my permission to start training everyone you okay for lessons with chakra. Authentication code for this order is Tora Tora Tora. Naruto and Sasuke furiously battled it out in one of their usual training fields on a cold spring morning. Several of the local nymphs and woodland spirits were cautiously watching the duo spar from a safe distance. Today they were sticking purely with taijutsu, but it was still a thrilling match for the spirits. Naruto was carefully controlling the force behind his punches so that he wasn't causing an earthquake every time he punched the ground. The young teen shinobi's speed had gone up in years so that he was now about as fast as Lee had been back in the Chunin exams. However, that speed paled in proportion to Naruto's strength, which was starting to reach ridiculous levels. Naruto seriously doubted that even Suand and Sakura working together could pull a freight train locomotive down the rail. He could pull a train with 12 loaded cars a mile and back without getting winded. However, Escape was weaving out of and around Naruto's attacks with practiced ease. Here and there Escape would deflect a punch or a kick. The wily old spirit dodged a punch aimed at his head and retaliated with a low sweeping kick to knock Naruto off his feet. Naruto avoided the kick by jumping into the air. The young shinobi quickly had to twist in midair because Escape had quickly planted the foot of the leg he had tried to sweep Naruto with on the ground and straightened his leg in an inhuman manner. The completely unorthodox attack move caught Naruto off guard and allowed Escape to land several punches on the shinobi. Escape ended his assault with a forceful push to the chest that sent Naruto flying straight towards a tree. Naruto quickly adjusted himself so that his feet landed on the trunk of the tree, and he used it as a springboard to get back towards Escape. The spirit quickly took a defensive stance and smirked at Naruto's obvious attack. At the last possible second, Naruto stuck his arms out and pushed against the ground, changing his trajectory. Naruto used Escape's split-second shock to kick him in the face before he rocketed into the sky. Escape quickly recovered from the attack, grabbed several blades of grass, and threw them into the air. He then jumped up into the air using the floating blades of grass as platforms to jump higher. As soon as Naruto saw what his sensei had done, he blurted out, "You have got to be fucking with me." As soon as Escape caught up with Naruto, he started to launch a storm of punches. Escape barked out as Naruto tried to defend himself, "If I'm fucking with you, then you're taking it up the ass." Escape then slipped out of an attempted grapple and pivoted himself above Naruto. He quickly delivered a forceful kick to the shinobi's back, which sent Naruto falling back to earth. Escape then positioned himself so that he landed on Naruto in the most painful way possible for the young shinobi. Escape grinned and said, "That's game, Naruto." Escape quickly got off of Naruto and helped his student up from the ground. "You did real good, Naruto. However, you still have several holes when it comes to fighting a pure taijutsu match. Those holes aren't apparent at camp since the campers cannot challenge you on a level needed for those holes to become apparent. Remember, synergy between your various abilities is great and is better than specialization in one field of battle. But to get the best results at synergy, you need to get all of your abilities to around the same level. You're still too reliant on ninjutsu, and as your battle with the Jotuns showed, there will be times when you cannot use all of your ninjutsu attacks." Naruto nodded his head as he listened to Escape rehash an old lesson point. He was well aware that ninjas, or even just warriors in general who were skilled at all points, were usually better than one who specialized in one field. Sure, someone who specialized in one field would get above average results in situations where their specialty was needed, but they were limited in what they could do in other situations. Taijutsu was difficult for Naruto because his strength was growing so rapidly and in an unpredictable manner. Sometimes he'd go weeks without a significant increase in strength, only to wake up one day and find himself twice as strong as when he went to bed. Other times he'd have a rapid growth in strength over several days. It almost made taijutsu training pointless for Naruto because he constantly had to retrain himself to not destroy everything he touched. It was 10 times as aggravating for him than chakra control training. Teacher and student quickly walked over to a nearby tree where some water bottles had been stashed. Escape and Naruto quickly grabbed their water bottles and downed them. Naruto chuckled after he chugged a third of his water. "Next time we spar, things will be different, Escape, since it won't be a pure taijutsu match." Escape quickly shot back, "You must suffering oxygen deprivation from sucking face with those goddesses who are constantly hanging off of you to think that. The level of destruction will increase, but the result will still be the same." Naruto was about to slug Escape for his comment about Artemis and Sunna when a loud shriek filled the training ground. Both Naruto and Escape turned their heads and saw what had startled their onlookers. A man covered in blood with a bloody bundle over his shoulder and using a bloodstained cold iron claymore as a cane slowly walked into the training field. Naruto watched as the man stumbled and fell to the ground. He immediately sprinted towards the bloody man with Escape hot on his heels. As Escape neared the downed man, he caught a whiff of his scent and almost tripped over in shock. By the Great Spirit, what could have driven you do this? While Sasuke looked at the man in shock, Naruto tried to think of a way to help the downed being. His sensor abilities told him that this wasn't a mortal, but he didn't have a clue what he was dealing with. The cold iron weapon hinted that the being was from the north, but Naruto couldn't place this being. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw that the being's skin was gone, revealing blood-covered muscle. What happened to this person? Naruto wondered in shock. Sasuke looked at the bundle that the being had been carrying and frowned. He skinned himself. Great Spirit have mercy, this selkie skinned himself. What madness is this? Naruto's eyes lit up, recognizing the being's species. Selkies were seal spirits who were sort of like sea nymphs in the northern pantheon. The selkie opened his eyes, looked at Naruto, and smiled. You are Naruto Uzumaki, son of Hira, daughter of Freyr, correct? Naruto nodded his head and said, yes, but you need to rest so that we can heal you. He pulled out his seal scroll with first aid supplies and started unsealing rolls of bandages. With a shake of his head, the selkie continued on. I came here knowing I would die so that I could deliver my pelt to you, Naruto. The selkie let out a terrible cough before continuing. I am Connor MacLeod of the Selkie clan MacLeod, and I have a great-granddaughter living in the west. The Norns told me that she will be in great danger because of her connection to the oceans unless her heritage is brought to the surface. Only the magic in a Selkie's pelt can bring that heritage out, so I have decided to give her mine. You are the only ants who moves between the two realms, Naruto, so please give it to her. The surrounding spirits were starting to cry from shock and disbelief. As semi-immortal beings, they couldn't fathom the idea of a being like them willing giving up their life as Connor MacLeod apparently had. Sasuke bowed his head towards Connor in respect and awe. Selkies got weaker the farther inland they went, so it was a Herculean task for Connor to walk here from the ocean, especially if he had skinned himself by the sea as the drying blotches on the pelt suggested. Naruto's whole body was shaking as he replied, I swear I will. Connor MacLeod. Who is your great-granddaughter and where can I find her? Connor smiled and said, you can find her in New York City. Her name is... Connor's voice faded as his strength gave out. His eyes closed and he died seconds later, falling back on his ninja training. Naruto quickly grabbed Connor's pelt and sealed it into a storage scroll. He then cleaned and sealed the Selkie's claymore so that he could give it to Connor's great-granddaughter. Even what Connor had done for his family, Naruto figured that he would want her to be given the claymore as well. After all of that, Naruto started collecting Connor's blood so that he could make some locator seals to track down the girl. 3 days later, Naruto, Sasuke, Hira, Arnold, Valerie, and several dozen spirits of different sorts were gathered by the sea. Sasuke had carefully hidden himself under the disguise of a minor woodland spirit, and was staying away as far away from Hira as he could. The group was standing near a carvey which Naruto had frantically built with cage buncheons over the past 3 days. Inside the carvey lay the remains of Connor MacLeod along with a small bag of hacked sliver that Naruto had offered up. Naruto turned to look at the assembled group and said, thank you all for coming here today. He paused for a second and then said, like most of you here, I barely knew Connor MacLeod, having met him as he was dying. His dreams, his hopes, his favorite foods, and a host of other things that made him who he was are unknown to me. However, what I do know about him lets me know that he was a good man and that I am poorer for not knowing him as a friend. Tears started to form in Naruto's eyes as he continued. Connor heard that one of his family will be in danger if she does not receive special aid. He willingly gave up his life to give her a chance to stay safe. That says it all right there about the man and leaves us all wondering if we will have the strength to make a similar sacrifice if we are placed in a similar situation. A moment of silence descended on the group as everyone waited to see if anyone wanted to add anything else to Naruto's short eulogy. Once the silence had continued long enough, Naruto walked over to the carvey and pushed it into the sea. Naruto waited until the carvey was far enough from land and then launched a katen, Karyu and Dan at the ship. The fire dragon jutsu quickly began to consume the vessel, completing the funeral. Slowly the assembled crowd started to break up. Naruto waited and firmly watched as the last burnt planks of the carvey were pulled under the waves. All Naruto could think about at that moment was his promise to Connor to deliver the Selkie's pelt to his great-granddaughter. Even with a blood tracking seal, how was he supposed to find one person in New York City? Naruto wasn't about to give up, but he wasn't sure if he was worthy of the trust that the Selkie had placed on him. Hira walked over to Naruto and gently placed her hand on her son's shoulders. The goddess had been surprised when Naruto invited her to the impromptu funeral, but felt compelled to do so when she found out the details of Connor MacLeod's death. Kushina had been to many similar funerals for shinobi she barely knew who had died on missions defending a teammate. Hira smiled and said, "Thank you for doing all of this for him, Naruto." Naruto nodded his head and replied, "It's the least I can do. That and completing the quest he gave me." and you will complete it, Naruto. I have full faith in your abilities to complete that quest when it needs to be completed. She then pulled Naruto into a hug and let him cry into her blouse. As Hiro let Naruto cry out his troubles, she let a small smile appear on her face. She was proud that Naruto had stepped up and arranged Connor's funeral. Leaders needed to take care of things when unexpected and unpleasant situations arise. Bucephalus thundered across the surface of Lake Ontario in the pre-dawn light, heading towards the New York coast, which was rapidly coming into sight. Naruto calmly rode on the 8-legged steed, wearing his celestial bronze shinobi-style armor. The fact that he was riding at just barely subsonic speeds did not bother Naruto, or Bucephalus in the least. Naruto quickly spotted a pier full of boats directly in front of him and coaxed Bucephalus to speed up. Bucephalus then jumped at what seemed like the last possible second and completely cleared the pier, landing on solid ground. Soon after reaching the United States again, Naruto slowed down Bucephalus to what would be a normal trot for a regular horse. With his mount now slower, Naruto closed his eyes and focused on his sensor abilities. While still not that great in terms of his sensor abilities, the half-blood shinobi could use his monstrous amounts of chakra to increase his abilities through sheer brute force. Normally no sane ninja would use such a trick because in addition to burning through one's reserves, it lit a person up to sensors like a neon sign. It also increased monsters' abilities to sense Naruto. However, that wasn't much of a problem because it signified to them that there was a massive collection of powerful half-bloods. All but the most suicidal of monsters that picked Naruto up would figure attacking such a group wasn't worth the trouble. The suicidal monsters that would attack had already been sent to Tartarus by Naruto during the past spring. After burning almost half of his chakra reserves, Naruto stopped his jutsu and smiled. He had found who he wanted to find and quickly directed Bucephalus to a new direction. Bucephalus quickly picked up speed and the duo started to race down the road towards a small forested section of land. About 20 minutes later, Naruto slowed his mount down so that they were once again moving at a trot. Naruto looked at the now very dense forest and wondered where they were hiding. Finally, a young voice called out, "Halt!" Naruto immediately made Bucephalus stop as ordered. Caroline soon emerged from the foliage with her faithful brother-turned-hunting dog Fang by her side and her bow in her hands. The hunter took a few moments to verify Naruto's face with her memories, and then she lowered her bow. Caroline quickly put her bow on her back and then motioned for Naruto to follow her. "Be on your best behavior, Naruto Uzumaki. Males are normally forbidden to enter our camp, so my lady is placing a great deal of trust in you to give you the honor of accompanying us for the final leg of the journey to Camp Half-Blood. If you betray that trust or prove unworthy of such an honor, it will be the last mistake you'll ever make." Caroline's threat was completely hollow, even though Naruto didn't know it. If any hunter tried to kill Naruto, it would be the same in Olympian law as if Artemis tried to kill him. That would mean Aphrodite would get the hunters, and then they'd get stuck in the worst whorehouse Aphrodite could find as the featured whores. Needless to say, the hunters didn't even permit themselves to dream of putting Naruto in life-threatening situations. Bucephalus didn't take Caroline's threat with nearly as much grace as Naruto did. The 8-legged horse snorted and began to approach Caroline in a threatening manner, even though Naruto was pulling at his lead to stop. In Bucephalus's mind, this midget Valkyrie wannabe needed to learn her place, and it was not threatening a true-born warrior princess. Naruto was pulling at the reins and shouting at Bucephalus to stop, but the colt's pride refused to give. Fang immediately jumped in front of Caroline and began growling at the 8-legged horse. Bucephalus locked eyes with Fang and the two beasts became absorbed in a contest of wills. Bucephalus refused to let the idea of anyone insulting or threatening his master stand. Fang refused to let anyone or anything threaten his sister. The boy-turned-dog had stood up to chimeras, hydras, and even a dragon once in order to protect his sister and had the scars to prove it. There was no way he'd back down to some monstrous Siamese horse. All the while Naruto was trying to get Bucephalus to calm down. Finally, the colt and the dog seemed to reach an agreement and slowly backed away from each other. Naruto held his head low and hurriedly said, "I'm terribly sorry about this, Caroline. Bucephalus is a good horse. He's just very protective of me." Caroline nodded her head, motioned for Naruto to follow her into camp. She silently prayed that this minor incident didn't hurt whatever plans Artemis had to get closer to Naruto. Like most hunters, Caroline was still bitter that Artemis had to get married in order to protect them. However, she and the others had to grudgingly admit that the fates could have easily arranged for their lady to be stuck with someone much worse than Naruto. Caroline quickly led Naruto into the hunters' camp, where the hunters were quickly breaking down their tents. Every hunter near Naruto became alert and quickly looked at him for a second before guardedly returning to their duties. They were not happy having a male in their camp. However, it was Artemis's wish, so they would accept it. In no time at all, Naruto was brought to Artemis's tent in the center of the camp. Caroline looked up at Naruto and said, "Dismount and wait here while I go let Lady Artemis know of your presence." Naruto nodded his head as Caroline quickly vanished into the tent. Not one to waste any time, Naruto quickly got off of Bucephalus and then took the saddle off of his mount. The saddle was quickly sealed away and scroll containing everything Naruto needed to take care of Bucephalus. He then unsealed a hoof pick and started to clean his partner's hooves. Caroline stepped out of the tent when Naruto was about halfway done the first hoof. She then said, "My lady will see you now, Naruto." After putting Bucephalus's hoof down, Naruto said, "I'll see her in just a second. I need to take care of something and it won't take much time at all." He quickly made the appropriate hand sign and said, "Kage Bunshin Jutsu." There was a poof of smoke as a second Naruto appeared, causing Caroline and the nearby hunters to widen their eyes and open their mouths in shock. The original Naruto handed his clone the hoof pick and started walking towards the tent door. Naruto gave Caroline a friendly smirk and said, "Don't worry, that's one of the things I've finally gotten authorization to reveal to all of you and potentially teach." With that said, he quickly entered the tent, leaving the hunters to stare at his clone. One of the hunters quickly grumbled, "Well, that explains a few things." Her comment quickly drew the attention of several hunters who sent her a questioning look. The hunter quickly said, "Those copies of his must be how Naruto created so many confusing trails in the Capture the Flag game. We really were chasing after a dozen different Narutos." The Naruto clone quickly piped up as he picked some mud from Bucephalus's hoof. "That had better just be a figure of speech, miss. Boss regularly used 4 dozen clones like me in those games of Capture the Flag." Inside the tent, Naruto was greeted to the sight of Artemis sitting at a table with a light breakfast laid out before her. Artemis turned to look at Naruto and then motioned to a chair that was opposite her at the table. "Sit and have something to eat, Naruto. Even with how fast Triton claims that usual steed you found in Alaska is, it would have taken you several hours to reach my camp from where you stopped last night. In fact, I was not anticipating your arrival until about 10 a.m. Naruto chuckled as he sat down. "I decided to take off extra early when you invited me to visit you and the hunters before we head to Camp Half-Blood. Since you don't often let others join you on your travels, I figured that making sure I arrived early was the least I could do to minimize any inconvenience this might be for you." Artemis nodded her head in acknowledgement. She had almost found his early arrival to be an inconvenience. Those thoughts ended when she realized that she could use this time to get Naruto closer to her, and she found the thought that he didn't want to inconvenience her a little sweet. In a casual manner, she grabbed a few grapes and ate them. Once she started to eat, Naruto took that as his cue to eat as well. The duo ate in silence, enjoying the comfortable silence and good food. Artemis was slightly nervous throughout the meal since she almost never ate alone with males. Towards the end of breakfast, Naruto broke the silence. "How was your hunting this week, Artemis?" "Huh?" Artemis blinked her eyes in surprise and her cheeks started to flush with embarrassment as she realized that she had let her mind wander. She quickly remembered what Naruto asked her and then replied, "The hunt went very well for me. It mostly consisted of deer, but the deer population in this area needs to be trimmed down a great deal. While I am grateful that mortals no longer hunt just to kill and leave the animal's body behind or overhunt, I wish that they hadn't shifted so far in the other direction on hunting issues. Even with my hunters and I working constantly to trim the various animal herds, some are getting away from us. That's not to mention that it's getting harder to process the kills in the mystical markets because the glut in it." Naruto thought about what Artemis told him and then replied, "Would that be why Camp Half-Blood's online website listed a change in its weekly menu from beef to venison? Most Half-Bloods outside the alumni ignored the website as they either forgot about it or didn't want to deal with the frustrating method of getting to the site. Naruto was constantly on the website since it was a great source of information." Artemis nodded her head, slightly impressed by Naruto's deductive reasoning skills. "Most people wouldn't have made that connection." "That is correct, Naruto. My hunters will need the upcoming summer session at Camp Half-Blood to rest from all the hunting. Sadly, the reserves of game meat the hunt has built up will not be completely used up by the time summer ends. But enough of that for now. Why don't you tell me more about this quest you've been tasked to complete?" The goddess watched as Naruto reached into a pocket and pulled out a small compass covered in seals. Naruto placed it on the table and said, "This compass is my best bet to complete the quest I talked to you about. It will react if I'm within 100 meters of whoever has Connor MacLeod's blood in their veins and will have the arrow glow if they are right in front of me. However, that doesn't do me much good since I'm effectively looking for a needle in a haystack. Furthermore, how will I identify the correct great-granddaughter to deliver the item to if he had more than one in New York City?" Artemis frowned, knowing that Naruto had been given a difficult task. She had known that Naruto had a delivery quest ever since Hira had removed Naruto's name from the available pool of half-bloods for quests lasting longer than a day. She then said, "My first recommendation for your quest, Naruto, is to narrow your search location." When this spirit said New York City, was he referring specifically to the 5 boroughs, the metropolitan area around New York City, or even the metropolitan statistical area? I have found that woodland spirits tend to even more imprecise about city boundaries than people who do not live near major metropolitan areas are. Naruto got nervous and he replied, "I don't know. Connor was dying when he found me. That's why I don't even know the name of the girl I'm looking for, how old she is, or even what she looks like." The goddess paused to think for a moment and nibbled on a slice of cheese. Once Artemis had considered Naruto's problem, she said, "I recommend that you start your search with the 5 boroughs and then expand your search area if necessary. The real challenge you'll have is creating a dynamic 3-dimensional search pattern to locate this girl." Artemis saw Naruto's confusion and explained the situation to him. When tracking your prey, you have to consider its environment and its life patterns. Urban environments, especially major cities like New York, are 3-dimensional. If you don't factor that into your search pattern, you can walk right by the girl because you are on the ground level and she is in the penthouse of a skyscraper or in a tunnel. Also, there are movement patterns to consider. Some people live their whole lives on a single street while others constantly travel to widespread locations in the city. While Naruto already knew he had a difficult task ahead of him, Artemis had just clearly pointed out how almost pointless it was. His compass was the only lead he had and it was very general. Then there was the fact that he'd have to get permission to leave camp to do his search since the quest wasn't a camp-authorized quest. Naruto bowed his head and folded his hands together. "Artemis, I know I'm asking a lot here, but can you or one of your hunters please help me out on this task?" It was a good thing that Naruto made his request now instead of in 10 seconds because Artemis was about to reach for a glass of milk. It was very good for her image as a goddess that she did not get that glass of milk given how shocked she was at Naruto's request. Half-bloods just don't ask gods and goddesses to help them on a quest. It just was one of those unwritten rules that everyone understood. Then again, Naruto wasn't exactly one to follow the norms. In all honesty, Artemis didn't follow the norms either, even for goddess. She had no association or even aptitude for the traditional feminine arts except for being a midwife. The fact that she was such a nonconformist was probably the main reason why she didn't take offense at Naruto's request. She then thought about it for a bit and realized that this would be an excellent opportunity to spend more time with Naruto. Finally, she said, "I will help you, Naruto. I do not like to leave a woman in trouble and this will be a challenging hunt." Chiron stood at his desk in the big house with a frown on his face. For the first time in centuries, a new course was being added to the list of mandatory courses. How Hira had rammed this change through the Olympian Council he couldn't fathom. From what Dionysus had muttered, this new course would drastically increase a half-blood's life expectancy. That alone would normally make Chiron all for this new ninchu course. However, he didn't have the faintest clue what ninchu was or how it was supposed to help his students. The only thing Chiron did know about the new ninchu course was that Naruto was going to be its new teacher. What could a 13-year-old know that no other half-blood knew? Now granted, Naruto could know something unique. Chiron wasn't conceited enough to think that he knew everything a half-blood could possibly learn. But the odds of that happening were about as likely as Demeter staring in a pawn video. No, that had technically happened as her latest lover accidentally left his computer camera running during a surprise visit. Perhaps the odds were like Aphrodite retiring to a convent for a century. Wait, she got shoved into one in the 1,500 seconds by the Goddesses Association to try and teach her some restraint. It really backfired, and that was all anyone was willing to say on the matter. Damn it, with Naruto's birth and Artemis gunning for him, they had lost the best illusions to an almost impossible event. Before Chiron could turn his musing back towards the new ninchu course, his ears picked up the campers causing a commotion in the camp. Chiron immediately grabbed his bow and quiver, attached them to his back, and bolted out of his study. Once Chiron was out of the big house, he turned and looked towards the source of the commotion. The yearly campers were all looking at the hill near Thalia's tree. As soon as Chiron turned his eyes, he saw what was causing the commotion. The hunters were entering camp again since they were coming for the summer session again. Unlike last year, Artemis timed her arrival so that she had arrived a day before the seasonal campers and during everyone's break period. Every camper and woodland spirit watched as the hunters came to camp riding silver reindeer. Artemis was riding a little in the front of the hunters on the Cyrenian hind in the form of a beautiful athletic 15-year-old girl. However, the biggest shock to the campers was that Naruto was riding next to Artemis on Bucephalus. A small smirk appeared on Chiron's face as he looked from Naruto and Artemis to some of the young teenage girls among the campers. Naruto could have easily become the summer heartthrob among the younger female campers with his now enhanced good looks along with his established reputation as a kind and smart young man. Intentionally or not, Artemis was scaring away her potential competition by staying close to him and making it look natural for them to be together. She was planting the question of how can I hope to compete with a goddess for Naruto into their heads. Artemis quickly led the hunters over to Chiron and then casually dismounted from the hind. She snapped her fingers to vanish away her saddle from the hind and motioned for the golden antlered reindeer to return to the forest. While the hind was leaving, Artemis turned to Chiron and said, "My hunters and I will be staying at Camp Half-Blood for the upcoming summer term. Bunking arrangements will be the same for us as they were last year and I will be taking over the archery classes again." Chiron nodded his head, having anticipated this. Having his niece as a camp instructor had been very beneficial for the camp last year. It's amazing just how much more well-behaved the campers could be when they realized that they had another adult supervisor who actually gave a damn about how they behaved. Chiron quickly replied, "Your cabin is prepared, Lady Artemis, for your and your hunter's stay. Thank you once again for taking time out of your busy duties to help out here at Camp Half-Blood." The next day after the seasonal campers arrived, everyone was assembled in the amphitheater to start the ninchu course. Most of the campers were talking amongst themselves as to what the course could be. All anyone knew was that this course would drastically increase their chances of staying alive. Annabeth and her siblings were eagerly sitting in the second row and the few open first row seats. The reserved spots in the first row were filled by Artemis, Dionysus, Chiron, and several senior woodland spirits. Ares' children were right behind the members of Cabin 6, also eager to find out about this course. Anything that increased a person's chance of survival had to be a combat skill, and that was something any child of Ares would want to learn. The rest of the amphitheater was filled by the campers and hunters in a fairly mixed seating arrangement. Class started with a tri-pronged kunai being thrown onto the stage and embedding itself on the amphitheater's platform. As soon as the kunai finished being embedded into the floor, there was an orange flash of light. The campers shouted in surprise when the flash ended to reveal Naruto crouching with the kunai firmly gripped in his hand. Naruto had his head bowed slightly so that no one could see the smirk on his face. At the moment, Naruto wasn't proficient enough with the Hurricane to use it in a serious spar, let alone a battle. However, his training over the past couple of months to make the compass to track Connor's descendant had given Naruto the skill needed to create a Hurricane formula. Just as Naruto had planned, the Hurricane had grabbed everyone's attention. Naruto quickly stood up and put away his Hurricane kunai. He had spent way too many hours creating the formula on the kunai to risk losing it. Naruto quickly began to speak using the standard voice amplifying jutsu that all academy instructors used. "Welcome to your first lesson in ninchu, or as it's translated into English, the ninja sect. Ninchu is a collection of arts passed down in my homeland of the Land of Fire and its neighbors, principally for infiltration, sabotage, battle, and healing. The Hurricane jutsu which I used to appear on stage was made famous by my father Minato Namikaze when he used to slaughter hundreds of enemy soldiers within seconds. With this technique I warp time and space, allowing me to appear immediately anywhere I wish to that I've designated. The Hurricane is one of the most advanced techniques or jutsus among the various arts that make up ninchu. Other examples of S-rank jutsus include the ability to cut lighting, to shred every cell in a creature, or even to subject an enemy to such mental agony that they take their own life to escape. Now none of you will have a chance of learning jutsus on that level for years." Naruto then jumped up, twisted to the side, and started to wall walk on a nearby support beam. You all are still months if not years away from being able to do a simple ninchu jutsu like the wall walking technique that I'm demonstrating. Under normal conditions in my village of Konoha, you could expect 4 years of study before learning the wall walking technique. Unfortunately for you all, my mother told me to teach you all using a modified wartime curriculum. This course will be hard physically and mentally, and I expect everyone to do independent practice outside of the allotted times for the course. Before anyone complains or claims that I am being unrealistic in my expectations, know a number of my teachers back in Konoha passed everything I am going to try and teach you this summer before they were 10. Pay attention and work hard, because even the most basic jutsus I'm going to teach you will save your lives." Naruto created 2 cage bunchins and handed them a scroll. He jumped down onto the platform while his clones jumped over to the curtain beam used for curtains when a play was put on. The clones unsealed a massive roll with an image of the chakra circulatory system printed on it, and let it unroll behind Naruto before vanishing. Naruto pointed to the massive image and said, "This is a diagram of the chakra circulatory system, which is the key to using all of the various ninja arts. Chakra is the name given to the energy that results from mixing one's spiritual energy that you gain from life experience and learning with one's physical energy, which is the power that rests inside every cell of your body. By mixing these two energies into chakra, you have far more energy to work with than if you used each energy source separately. Also, chakra can be manipulated and used for far more things than physical or spiritual energy. Chakra flows through your body in the system you see behind me, much like blood through your veins. Once again, chakra is the key to performing any of the various ninja arts. Of these arts, there are 3 that you have no knowledge of or equivalent here in America. These arts are genjutsu, the illusionary arts, ninjutsu, the ninja arts, and fuinjutsu, the sealing arts. Chakra is also commonly used to enhance one's abilities with weapons and unarmed combat, to name 2 examples of some of the ninja arts already known to you. I will be handing out books to all of you after this lesson that will cover each of these arts in more depth. Those of you who are interested in genjutsu must pay special attention to the textbooks I give you. Genjutsu is a very powerful art that I am not gifted in. While my abilities in it are considered decent for a genin, they are nothing to brag about among trained shinobi. At this point, Annabeth cut in with a question. "What's a genin, Naruto?" Naruto blinked his eyes in surprise for a second before he remembered that no one in the class had any idea of the basic village organizational structure. He signed and then quickly adjusted his lecture. "Okay, I'll give you all a very brief intro into shinobi organization in my homeland and the basic ranking of ninjas and jutsus. Except for the part on the jutsus, you likely won't need to remember what I'm about to tell you, although it might help on a few points in the textbooks. In Konoha, ninjas are listed by military rank and danger rank. The military rank relates to a shinobi's place in the shinobi forces, while their danger or threat rank is a gauge to refer to how powerful the shinobi is in battle. The basic rank progression is student, genin, chunin, tokubetsu or special jonin, and kage. The danger rank is set up in order of power as E, D, C, B, A, and S. The 2 rankings are set up so that usually the 2 are in sync up until the jonin rank. This is usually because of the limited position slots or a village's talent pool. There is only one kage in Konoha known as the Hokage, and when I was last in the village there were several S-rank jonins. I also know of several village heads in other countries that hold the equivalent responsibilities to a kage, even if they don't hold the prestige that the kage title holds, that are only a ranked. However, there are fluctuations between the 2 systems where, due to injury or bureaucratic issues, a ninja's military and danger ranks are vastly out of sync. I'm an example of such a ninja, as I only hold the rank of genin, but my danger rank is listed as A. That means that if I had been ordered to by the Hokage, I could have killed everyone here in camp that isn't truly immortal when I arrived here last year, instead of hiding my abilities. Thankfully, such an order won't come because everyone in camp is considered by the Hokage as an allied clan to the village through Hira and me. Now enough talking on this matter, and let us get back to the basics of chakra. As anyone could expect, most of the campers had become very unsettled by the end of Naruto's class. Not that anyone could blame them, since Naruto had introduced the biggest change to their perception of reality since they found out the truth about the mythological world. The powers and abilities that Naruto was offering to teach everyone had even the unwilling student among the half-bloods eager to learn. However, the fact that Naruto had these abilities before he even came to camp was a bit disturbing. Many half-bloods, especially those who had spent a lot of time with Naruto last year, were shaken by the fact that Naruto could have killed them if he had been ordered to do so. Interestingly enough, the campers who were most at ease with the revelations Naruto had unveiled during the ninja course were the hunters. They already knew that Naruto had special abilities when he created the shadow clone at their camp. Furthermore, Zoe had informed all of the hunters about her suspicions regarding Naruto's background months ago. She hadn't been anticipating that Naruto came from a ninja village, but what he had revealed matched her observations of what his background would have to be like. The hunters could also understand Naruto's loyalty to and willingness to follow the orders of his Hokage, as they would do the same for Artemis. They also would have tried to kill everyone in Camp Half-Blood in a heartbeat if Artemis asked them to do so. None of that mattered to Naruto at the moment, as he was in the arena using his time to do some training. The arena floor had over a dozen cage bunchins performing different chakra exercises and another half-dozen sparring with Naruto. Several campers watched with open mouths as Naruto and his sparring partners moved like something straight out of a wuxia film. They had all wondered what Naruto had been training in during those late-night sessions last year, and they were not disappointed by what they saw. Annabeth was among the campers watching Naruto's amazing training session. She hadn't talked to Naruto since the first ninja class, but she was trying to sort things out. Last year Naruto had been like a big brother to her. He had checked up on her when Charlie died and he never treated her like a little girl. It had been wonderful and she had really been looking forward to that again this summer. However, the fact that Naruto would have killed her last year if ordered to had really shaken her up. Had everything last summer just been a lie on Naruto's part? Annabeth didn't want to think so since she had dealt with monsters who tried to trick half-bloods before. Since she could see through the deceptions of monsters with thousands of years of experience tricking half-bloods, she obviously could see through any deception that half-blood could try. However, the small bit of caution that Athena had gifted all of her children to combat their usual fatal flaw was scratching at Annabeth's mind as she watched Naruto's training session. The abilities Naruto was demonstrating shocked her and made her jealous. Who wouldn't be jealous of the ability to learn a dozen different things at once? Plus the grace and power Naruto was demonstrating in his spar was far more than Annabeth ever imagined someone could do. Without any shame, Annabeth could say that she was one of the best fighters her age, but Naruto was obviously in an entirely different league than her. Soon enough Naruto finished off the last clone with a kunai thrust straight through the heart. He then formed another 24 cage buncheons and had them run to the opposite side of the arena. Naruto held out his hand and formed a rasengan in the open palm. One of the clones nodded their head and started to run towards Naruto. As the clone approached, Naruto brought his other hand up to clasp his outstretched arm at the elbow, and funneled a blast of wind chakra through his now braced arm. The rasengan shot away from Naruto's palm at the clone and cut through it. The rasengan continued on its path until it hit a seal barrier a few inches from the arena wall. Many of Naruto's observers were shocked at the resulting explosion and at Naruto's complete nonchalance at the explosion. Last year he had covered the arena in seals to protect it from his training, and he had updated those seals last night. With calm professionalism, Naruto formed another rasengan and had another clone come at him. Once again Naruto fired the rasengan at the clone, only this time the rasengan veered off to the right, completely missing the clone. The clone stopped in front of Naruto, gave him the raspberry, and then dismissed himself. After the clone was gone, Naruto formed another rasengan and proceeded to try the exercise again. Naruto was trying to develop a long-range variation of the rasengan that he could use in situations where futon, Rasen Shuriken was inadvisable to use. Sure, he had the Katen, Karyuden Jutsu, but that attack rapidly lost a lot of its power if the target was more than 10 meters away. Besides, using fire jutsu reminded Naruto too much about Sasuke. To get his new jutsu, Naruto had decided to back to drawing board, so to speak, and worked along a different line of thought to complete the rasengan. Naruto trying to use his wind chakra to shoot the rasengan from his hand like a cannonball. Some recent testing in Alaska before he left had revealed that a fired plain rasengan could maintain its cohesiveness and destructive potential for 270 to 290 meters. That made the wind style rasengan cannon Naruto was creating the longest ranged attack a ninja could perform without sage chakra or some other unique ability. However, Naruto wasn't about to say that he had finished the jutsu because its accuracy was absolute crap. He was only able to hit 3 clones out of 24 at 20 meters, and one of those hits was a technicality, as it was the debris from the rasengan hitting the ground near the clone that got it. Just as Naruto was about to create more clones to practice his attack again, the arena's bell rang, signaling the end of Naruto's time. Naruto quickly dispelled the clones that had been training and collected the gear they had been using. A small smirk appeared on Naruto's face as he picked up the book on firearms one of his clones had been reading while balancing on a kunai. The basics of how a gun worked provided Naruto with several clues on how to improve on the wind style rasengan cannon that he'd have to try in his next session. It wasn't until after lunch that Annabeth got up the courage to talk to Naruto. She walked over to table 2 where Naruto was cleaning up and coughed to get his attention. Naruto turned around and looked at Annabeth. He then said, "Good afternoon, Annabeth. What can I do for you today?" Annabeth steeled her nerves and said, 2 days ago during the ninchu class you said that you would have killed everyone in class if ordered. Is that true, Naruto?" Almost all of the campers stopped what they were doing and tried to discreetly listen in on what Naruto had to say. Naruto immediately noticed everyone trying to listen in and discreetly used a jutsu to carry his voice. They all had to hear this, and hopefully it would clear the air between him and the other campers. Annabeth, the answer to your question is both simple and very complex, as it touches on one of the major philosophical divides among the shinobi population. That divide is the question of whether shinobi are soldiers or are they tools of their village. I, along with most of Konoha, belong to the school of thought that shinobi are soldiers instead of tools. This school recognizes that shinobi are human with their own hopes, dreams, desires, loyalties, emotions, and regrets. The other school of thought holds that a shinobi should have no will, emotions, or desires outside of what their leader orders them to have, as if they were an automaton. Both schools of thought, despite their vast differences, do agree on certain issues, and the most important of those issues is loyalty and obedience to the chain of command. I am sworn to the Hokage service until I die, or the Hokage releases me from her service. Like the members of the various militaries in the United States, I took an oath to obey all legitimate orders the Hokage gives me to the best of my abilities. Despite any anguish I or another shinobi might feel about a task, we must fulfill our orders. So in short, yes, I would done my best to eliminate everyone in this camp if I had been ordered, even though it would have torn me up inside. Such orders won't come, of course, because it makes no sense for the Hokage to order an attack on an ally. The only reason I brought that fact up yesterday was to drive home to you and everyone else that the arts I am teaching are deadly and mainly intended for war. Few things can make a point stick in one's mind than being faced with your own mortality. My training is intended to make you and the others into soldiers able to defend your precious people from harm, and not the stereotypical glory hound heroes that we hear about. The ability and willingness to kill does not mean one is eager to kill. Both in Konoha and in the United States have their military forces filled with men and women who are willing to kill or even lay down their lives in order to defend their countries. But almost without exception, they all hope that they never get put into a situation where they need to take a life. General Douglas MacArthur was very accurate when he said the soldier, above all other people, prays for peace, for he must suffer and bear the deepest wounds and scars of war. I have met many war veterans in Konoha's shinobi force, and except for one, they all wanted to maintain peace. On the other hand, there are plenty of people out there who revel in the ability to take lives. I've encountered people who are more monstrous than the monsters that try to hunt us. On my very first mission outside of Konoha, I encountered a missing ninja, a traitor who tried to overthrow his cage, who loved to kill. He came from Kiri, where the Tool school of thought was strong, and even had a graduation test involving death matches among the graduating students of their ninja academy. This ninja I faced off against entered his academy on graduation day, and without a day of schooling killed all the other students in the academy. He did it so that he could ensure that he became a genin by being the only candidate for several years, and because he felt like it. That is an example of someone who is eager to kill just for the thrill they get from killing. Naruto unsealed a black book and placed it on the table so that Annabeth could see it. Naruto then continued so that she couldn't run away in the middle of his lecture in a very somber tone. This is my judgment book. My sensei Jiraiya got me started on this during our training journey after I took the life of a bandit that attacked us. It contains the names and surrounding events of every sentient being whose life I've taken and for whom I'll have to answer to Uncle Hades or the Shinigami when I die. Once a week I read it to remind myself of what I've done and to question whether or not I can justify to myself the lives I've taken. Every life, even the life of a depraved psychopath, is precious, and every life's premature demise contributes to a cycle of hatred and suffering. Everyone has bonds with other people, and those people are hurt when a person is killed. When I came to America, my judgment book had 37 entries in it. The current entry count is 273, and every day I pray that I won't have to add a new entry. When I enter combat, I always prefer to fight an enemy to wound and incapacitate them unless directly ordered not to do so. On those times I have to fight an enemy with the intention to kill, I always try to kill them as quickly and painlessly for them as possible. Whenever or wherever I can without endangering others in combat, I try to talk my opponent into a peaceful solution. Almost all of the 236 monsters I've slain can testify that I tried to talk them into settling our matches peacefully, and that I only killed them when they wouldn't give up the fight. Annabeth blinked her eyes in shock and blurted out, "But they're monsters." Naruto gave her a hard look and said, "That justifies nothing, Annabeth. What someone is has no bearing on who they are. By that same logic, they are perfectly justified in killing us since we are just half-bloods. Fighting someone just because they are different than you is stupid. Why aren't you and your siblings trying to kill every satyr and nymph in the camp? They're not half-bloods, so by your logic we should be trying to exterminate them. Let's take your logic to its fullest conclusion, Annabeth, and start fighting the gods and mortals. They aren't like us, so we should attack them." Just as anyone could expect, Annabeth was on the verge of tears as her mind feebly tried to support her arguments against the maelstrom Naruto was unleashing. Naruto grabbed her shoulder to make sure Annabeth wouldn't run away as he continued. To try and kill someone just because of what they are is diabolical and the mark of an abomination fit only for the worst pits of Tartarus. Now, I will grant you that almost all of the beings we call monsters want to kill us or because they want to harm others. In those situations it is acceptable, perhaps even commendable, to fight them to the death in order to protect yourself and especially to protect others. An enemy must only be slain for what they have done, even if it is simply that they chose a different side in a conflict. If anyone kills another just because of what that person is, then the person doing the killing kills themselves at the same time. Naruto then pulled the shocked Annabeth into a firm hug. Annabeth was so out of it because of Naruto's arguments that she offered no resistance to the hug. Almost instantly the young girl was lost in Naruto's warm and caring aura and eagerly used it as a security blanket as she assimilated everything she had learned in the impromptu lecture. While holding Annabeth, Naruto sent up a silent prayer to Athena to help Annabeth accept what she had learned. Part of him was upset for tearing apart another section of her childish view of the world. However, Annabeth and by extension the other half-bloods in camp needed to realize that the world was not as simple or clear-cut as they had thought. It was a shame that Camp Half-Blood didn't bring in alumni to help train everyone. Passing down life experience and hard-won wisdom was vital for any group's survival. That was why Konoha dedicated such a sizable minority of its Jonin forces to teaching genins. If it was just about training skills, then having Chunins teach genin squads would work. However, as several studies during the Shinobi Wars showed, wisdom and experience are just as important, if not slightly more than skill, for someone's survival. Chiron was doing an excellent job in passing down the skills everyone needed, but he was simply stretched too thin to pass along his wisdom in meaningful amounts. Several days after Naruto's lunch lecture, the campers had been directed to report to the arena for ninchu class instead of the amphitheater. As everyone found their seats, they started to gossip about why the class venue had changed. The gossip got heated when several campers noticed an almost eager gleam in Mr. D's eyes. That made several of the older campers nervous, as Mr. D usually only got that gleam when a half-blood was about to undergo a great deal of pain and public humiliation. Most of those campers sent up a small prayer to Tich to have mercy on the poor fool that had earned this gleam. Soon enough the bell rang signaling the start of class, and Naruto walked out onto the arena floor decked in his shinobi-style armor. Naruto looked at the crowd and then spoke with a jutsu amplifying his voice. For the past couple of days I have been hitting you with a deluge of information regarding the various ninchu arts. Overall, I've been impressed with how you all have held up in learning everything at an accelerated rate. However, some of you are starting to wonder if all of this extra training is worth it. After all, dozens of heroes stayed alive and became legendary without all of these skills, so why should we need them now? That is what several of you have been saying in your minds, and I can see it in your eyes. So to show you just why it is so vital for you to learn the ninchu arts, a special demonstration has been arranged for you all. There was a flutter of leaves on the other side of the arena floor as Hira appeared in her dual-natured form dressed in shinobi battle armor. Gasps of surprise filled the stadium as some of the campers realized what was about to happen. Naruto nodded his head and continued his speech. My mother has generously donated her weekly visit to help me demonstrate what a shinobi battle is like by having a sparring match with me. For the purpose of this demonstration, Mother is limiting herself to just the abilities her human nature commands. As Kushina Uzumaki, she was a Jonin of Konoha and an S-ranked shinobi. This match will last for either 4 hours or until one of us cannot continue to fight. Now, let the match begin. Mother and son started the match off by hitting each other with their strongest blast of killing intent. The combined killing intent froze most of the campers in their seats as they felt like they had somehow fallen into a nest of monsters out for their blood. The more senior hunters and even Artemis had to suppress a shiver as the killing intent brought back unwanted memories of the rare, disastrous hunting expeditions that the hunt had taken. Dionysus was shivering in fear as the killing intent brought back terrifying memories from when he was just a demigod. While still keeping up the killing intent, Hira quickly fished out several shurikens from her holster and threw them at Naruto. She then used the shuriken cage bunshin jutsu to turn the 3 original shurikens into thousands. Naruto dodged the incoming storm of death by diving into the arena floor and letting the shurikens fly over him. Sure, he could have used a seal barrier to avoid the damage, but the basics of the Daten Shinju Zanchu Jutsu was a wonderful defense and far less taxing on one's chakra. Naruto was certain that this match he would finally be facing an opponent that he couldn't simply outlast with his monstrous chakra reserve, since his opponent was his mother. Hira smiled and called out, "I'm glad to see you remembered the basics, son. Now why don't you come up and play?" She then slammed her fist into the ground, shattering the arena floor and caused a massive crater to form that would have shocked even Tsunade. Naruto was uprooted from his hiding spot and blinked his eyes in shock, much like Kakashi had done years ago when Sakura had put him into a similar situation. Hira smirked when she saw Naruto's confusion and said, "Thanks to my dual-natured state, my mortal side gets all of the unique benefits you get from being my son Naruto, such as a massive increase in strength. Now let's get this show fired up." Hira then launched a fireball at Naruto without using hand seals. Almost everyone in the audience thought that Hira was actually trying to kill Naruto, and were frozen to their seats from shock and horror. Naruto was used to test matches like this and easily kept his calm. He simply created 6 cage bunshin and the 7 Narutos jumped away from danger. All of the Narutos formed a rasengan in their outstretched palm at the same time and fired their ball of chakra at Hira. These rasengan cannons were far more accurate than Naruto had previously demonstrated because he had caused his wind chakra to spin and was spinning the rasengan in his hand to simulate the rifling of a gun. Naruto still hadn't quite worked out all of the details as one of the rasengans went way off course. But the remaining 6 formed a deadly volley aimed at Hira. Hira's hand started to glow with chakra, and with blinding speed she traced out 3 circles that hung glowing in the air. She then grabbed the 3 chakra circles and threw them onto the ground around her. The circles glowed and within seconds caused a purple tetrahedron to form protectively around her. Hira calmly watched as the 6 rasengans impacted her barrier, causing its surface to ripple as dust was kicked up. While the dust clouded her from the camper's view, it did not affect her ability to observe the battle thanks to her sensing abilities. She tracked her son and his clones while she quickly planned her next move. The tetrahedron-shaped barrier was dropped as the dust was starting to settle, and Hira jumped out with 6 cage bunshins of her own. Everyone in the crowd watched in amazement as the Hiras and Narutos proceeded into multiple taijutsu matches. 2 of the mother and son pairs were having their matches on the arena walls. Every Naruto and Hira was moving at almost blinding speed as their limbs were blurs to all but the best trained eyes. Slowly the clones started to disperse as their opponent struck a solid blow. When the last clone was destroyed, the duo found themselves on opposite sides of the arena floor. A smirk appeared on Hira's face as she turned to face her son. Naruto's combat abilities were definitely shaping up as she had hoped they would when Kushina first found out she was pregnant. She had watched Naruto train when she could, but a part of her had been aching to have a sparring match with him so that she could test just how good he was herself. Hira wasn't completely sure whether that desire came from being a kunoichi as Kushina or if it was a trait of the first race of men's women. All of her female friends had talked about training their future children with joy, but then all of them had been kunoichis. But then, the source of the desire really didn't matter at the end of the day. With her smirk still firmly on her face, Hira summoned 2 chakra chains, which were her most feared weapons as Kushina. She threw the free ends of both chains at Naruto faster than a kunai. He dogged the first attack, but Hira simply ordered her chains to change direction. Naruto quickly pulled out a pair of kunai, sharpened them with his wind chakra, and used them to block Hira's next attack. The kunai lasted for just 2 seconds before the chains shattered them. However, that gave Naruto enough time to jump out of the attack. Unfortunately for Naruto, he quickly started a cat and mouse game with the chains. Thankfully for Naruto, he was an expert in dodging, or the fight would have been all over for him now. In between avoiding the chakra chains, he wondered what his ancestors had done to cause their clan to have the only female-specific bloodline jutsu in the world. Gender-specific bloodline jutsus among Kekkei Genkai holders were fairly rare, but were almost always limited to men. Naruto then remembered an entry in his father's journal and formed a rasengan in each hand. The chakra chains approached Naruto again, and this time he deflected them with the rasengans. After several blocks, the ends of the chains started to crack, causing Hira to frown. She hadn't been expecting Naruto to figure out his father's trick to deal with her chains. With a shrug, Hira decided to take things up a notch and added her fire nature to the chains. Fire raced down the chains, causing them to glow red hot. Naruto was now forced to pull back as soon as he deflected a chain so he didn't get burned. Hira continued her relentless assault, constantly picking up the speed with which she threw the chains until it looked like she was using 4 chains to attack with. Without warning, Hira pulled her chains back and called out to Naruto, "Very good job, son. Almost all enemies I've faced would have been killed by this point. I will have to mention to Tsunade that you should have your threat level officially moved up to S class when I talk to her next time. However, I suggest you forfeit because I'm about to use my ultimate jutsu." Hira immediately jumped into the air, summoned a cage bunshin, and the 2 Hiras jumped away from each other towards opposite sides of the arena with a dozen chakra chains connecting them. Both Hiras started to twirl the chains in one hand like jump ropes while the chains became covered in fire chakra. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he saw the spinning inferno of chains tear into the ground like it was butter and became twice as tall as his mother. The two Hiras shouted out, "Uzumaki's secret jutsu, Hell's Harvester." Both Hiras started to run towards Naruto, leaving a smoldering trail of half-molten earth behind their Hell's Harvester. Naruto knew that he couldn't avoid his mother's jutsu. The Chidama rasengan was the only jutsu he could think of that could stop Hira's jutsu, but he could only perform the jutsu when in Sage mode. How else could one person control such a gargantuan amount of chakra? Naruto's eyes widened in shock, realizing that he had forgotten his proven solution to a problem too big for one person to handle. A smirk then settled onto Naruto's face as he summoned half a dozen cage buncheons. With just seconds to spare, Naruto and his clones created a Chidama rasengan. Hell's Harvester met the Chidama rasengan head-on, triggering a massive explosion of power. The explosion created a blast of light so bright that everyone was forced to look away. At the same time, the audience had to grab onto their seats for dear life as they were buffeted by Category 5 hurricane-like winds. Slowly, ever so slowly, the audience was able to turn around and return their attention to the dust cloud-covered arena pit. Everyone anxiously watched and waited for the dust cloud to dissipate with bated breath. After a couple of minutes that seemed like hours, the dust settled enough for everyone to see the arena pit. The most accurate description of the arena floor was a preview of Tartarus. Most of the ground was baked black, while the arena floor had become a mixture of jagged peaks and craters. Steam was still billowing out of some of the newly created crevices. Soon enough, Hira and Naruto were spotted half buried in their own craters. Some campers wondered if the duo had died, even if it was impossible for Hira to die. Chiron, Artemis, the hunters, and a couple of the half-bloods noticed Naruto and Hira breathing steadily even though they were half buried. First Naruto and then Hira started to stir in their craters. However, both mother and son quickly slumped back onto the ground from exhaustion. Chiron, Artemis, and Dionysus quickly talked to each other and came to an agreement. Chiron then stood up and said, "Because neither participant can continue, we have decided to declare that this demonstration is over." Things quickly got more interesting in Camp Half-Blood after Naruto's sparring match with Hira. While the arena was going to be out of commission for a while, Naruto and Hira quickly got back into perfect shape. Hira only had to use some of her divine energy to heal herself, while Naruto's already phenomenal healing was kicked into overdrive by a small bit of nectar. After 10 minutes of rest, Naruto was able to lead everyone over to the amphitheater to finish the ninchu lessons for the day. Once they got over the shock of the spar, the half-bloods had become more comfortable with Naruto again. They now fully understood that he was a soldier and all that it entailed. Naruto's lunch lecture had started their understanding, and the spar drove away their remaining doubts. Things didn't go back to the way they were last summer, but then things never do go back to just as they were before something happens. By the end of the week, Annabeth had resumed her usual games with Naruto, and all his other associates resumed their usual activities with him. While the campers now fully accepted Naruto as their teacher and as a soldier, the revelations about Naruto were about to cause him some problems. Chiron was standing at his desk going over the invoice requests for strawberries and suppressed a groan. Why was Dionysus always finding ways to shove his paperwork onto him? For the past week, Chiron had been dealing with the paperwork necessary to replace the arena, and the camp director had conveniently decided to put all of the other paperwork for running the camp on hold until Chiron could get to them. Of course, that meant that he also had to deal with late forms to explain why the already monstrous amount of paperwork was not completed on time. Thank the fates that Artemis was willing to do all of the paperwork relating to the archery classes. Chiron was pulled from his personal field of punishment by someone knocking on his office door. The ageless centaur took off his glasses and said, "You can come in." He then backed away from the desk so that he could turn and look at the office door. The door opened to reveal Luke, who was holding a clipboard. Chiron felt a stab of regret as he viewed himself as responsible for the boy's disastrous quest. If only he had been a little more determined to make Luke look at Marco Polo, then perhaps the quest wouldn't have ended so terribly. At least Heracles had been punished for trying to protect his reputation when the investigation had found that he was the one who intercepted the orders to tell everyone the truth about that labor. According to rumor, Hera had stuffed the minor god into a tiki statue, and then sold the statue to a gay S&M seniors club for the obese to go in the luau-themed section of the club. Dionysus had stopped complaining as much about being at Camp Half-Blood when he heard that. Chiron hid his regret and said, "Good afternoon, Luke. What can I help you with?" Luke handed Chiron the clipboard he had been holding and said, "This is a petition that has been circulating throughout camp for a while that I've been asked to deliver to you. I and the other signers of the petition feel that Naruto Uzumaki should be banned from playing Capture the Flag. Instantly, the friendly look on Chiron's face vanished as his face set itself into a stony and stormy expression. Chiron's eyes drilled into Luke's as he spoke with a touch of steel in his voice. "Just why have you brought this petition to me, Castellan? There had better be a very good reason behind this petition, or everyone who signed this petition will be banned instead." Chiron hated bullying and discrimination in his camp. While he couldn't stop every act of bullying or force people to change their opinions, he could and would stop every such act against a camper that he saw or heard about. Life was tough enough outside Camp Half-Blood's boundaries for his charges. The ageless centaur would rather jump into Tartarus than let his camp stop being a refuge for Half-Bloods. Luke gulped in surprise as he hadn't expected Chiron to be this upset just by the petition's existence. Thankfully for Luke, he had inherited his father's silver tongue and he kept his cool. Luke looked down at the ground as if he were ashamed as he started to explain things to Chiron. "Look, Chiron, this petition is not about hurting Naruto or an attempt to exclude him from regular camper activities. The only reason why this petition got started and why everyone signed it was out of love for the Capture the Flag game. Now I know that our reason doesn't make much sense at first glance, but I can explain why everyone on the petition feels that Naruto is unintentionally hurting the game for everyone. Naruto is simply too good for the rest of the hunters to offer him a challenge. Last year, while hiding most of his abilities from everyone, Naruto was able to deliver the first ever shutout in the camp's history. With the abilities that Naruto actually has, it's clear to many that the only way to be on the winning side is to arrange to be on Naruto's team this year. Capture the Flag isn't supposed to be a political game where whoever gets one person on their side wins. It's supposed to be a fun way for us to test out our survival abilities in a safe but competitive manner." As much as Chiron didn't want to admit it, Luke and the signers of the petition did have a logical argument against letting Naruto play and Capture the Flag. There were a sizable number of campers who felt this way from all of the names on the petition, even if they weren't a majority of the campers. Still, Chiron wasn't about to let this petition get any further if he could stop it from being put to a councilor vote without breaking any rules. "Where will it end, Luke? Tell me, Luke, where will you and the others stop if Naruto is to be excluded from the game? Perhaps we should forbid Cabinet from playing Capture the Flag. After all, they all have centuries of experience that regular campers just don't have, and they had a massive winning streak before Naruto ended it. Or maybe we should ban the use of divine gifts in the game. Most campers don't have a set of shoes that let them fly. Tell me, Luke, where does it end?" Luke furiously thought about how he could save his petition and came up with a solution. "The ban doesn't have to be permanent, Chiron. It just has to last long enough for everyone else, including me, to build up our skills so that Naruto doesn't stay an automatic I win ticket for whoever is on his team. At the moment, Naruto playing with us is like Michael Jordan playing on an elementary basketball team. Like the hypothetical elementary kids on the other team against MJ. There is nothing anyone currently can do to stop Naruto from winning. The hunters could have been beaten before Naruto came to camp if previous campers had worked harder on teamwork and trust. Magical gifts have their own weaknesses that can be exploited. Naruto does not have any weaknesses for the opposing side to try and exploit. Even Naruto and his mother admitted that he is in a league above us. In the ninchu class, Naruto stated that most campers would be ranked as an E-level threat while a few would be considered D-ranked. On the other hand, Naruto is officially in a ranked threat, and according to his mother that rank should be officially bumped up to S rank. I know the threat ranking system is new to you as it is to everyone else in camp. However, I did some reading about the threat ranking system. According to the textbook, roughly 1 in 50 shinobis is able to make it to a rank, and out of those shinobi only 1 in 100 on average is able to become S rank. Chiron let out a sigh and said, "Very well, Luke. As you have more than the minimum number of signatures and a reasonable justification for your petition, I will bring it to the councilor's attention at our next meeting. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of paperwork to deal with." Chiron then turned around to continue the office work to keep the camp running and missed the smirk that formed on Luke's face. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author HistorianoftheKais on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.